we start playing?
You gotta start by item, right?
Yes.
6:29.
Yep. So how's banking today, Rick?
No different than
Same, I was gonna say, same.
Any big deals you're working on? Good.
my Volkswagen.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Volkswagen dealers refinancing?
It's a good time to buy one. Not my job. I wouldn't want to be doing those guys right now.
I don't know, my mail it, or whatever it's called, gavel. I'd like to call the special meeting for the Village of Carrick for Wednesday, or for Thursday, September 24, 2015, to order. Roll call, please.
Chapman?
Here.
McAlpine?
Here.
Kraus?
Here.
Cavelli? Here. Costello?
Here.
Duda?
Here.
Would you please join me in the pledge of allegiance? I pledge allegiance
to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you. We'll now go to public comments where anybody's, the vast crowd may want to say something. So we'll go ahead and open and close public comment. So on with the meat of the meeting is our social media presentation presented by Julie Tampador from Ansel Joint. So I'll turn it over to you.
Thank you, Mayor. We'll just do a brief introduction. I'll appreciate the board's attendance tonight at a special workshop. As had been discussed, we wanted to have a separate meeting to focus in on this issue. And as I researched proper approach to have this in a workshop session, Ms. Tappendorf works for Ansel Blink, and as you recall, Ansel Blink does a variety of labor relations work for us as well as special project assignments. And so I called upon Julie, and she appreciates you being here tonight. Julie is a specialty focused in her practice on social media policies for municipalities. She does a lot of work for a number of suburbs throughout the area, including Village of Lindenhurst, presently Village of Lincolnshire, a variety of other villages throughout the area, and appreciate her being here tonight. It's designed to be a workshop session, so she's got a number of slides to go through, but this is a talking session. We'd like to hear your feedback on any matter during the presentation, but for lack of anything else to say, I'll have Julie walk us through the slides, and don't hesitate to ask if you have any questions.
Yeah, and I would say the same thing, that we'll do pretty informally. I have slides because it just keeps me on track, so I'm not focusing on any one area. So there are a variety of issues I want to talk about, legal issues, sometimes ethical issues, issues with respect to government social media. But even if you don't have your own government social media sites, there are issues you need to know about. I've been lecturing on social media for, I don't even know how many years, I'm trying to remember. I had a client, this is how I got into it, I had a client, a village, they always remain nameless, so I won't use your name either, so you can tell me anything. But a client who called me and said, you know what, we want to set up a Facebook page, many years ago, before really government was getting into Facebook. And I said, great, let's talk about, some of the issues we need to think about, First Amendment issues, Freedom of Information Act, open meetings, all these things that you don't really think about, and we didn't think about, let's say, when we started using email. How many of you remember? I remember practice before email, government practice before that. All of a sudden it was email, and no one thought, email could be an Open Meetings Act issue, right? We always thought you had to be in a room, you had to talk. So social media has a lot of the same implications, electronic communications, all of the things we think about. So when I was working with this client and doing the research on my own, this was the first time I'd encountered this, these kind of issues came up. At the time, and I don't know how many of you are on Facebook or familiar with it, but at the time you could choose whether or not to allow comments. So you could make it almost like a website. You could set up a page and then choose to disable comments. You can't do that anymore. Once you open up Facebook now, it's a free-for-all. We look at it as what I like to call a interactive communication as opposed to a static. Static is like your website. You're disseminating, it's a one-way. Facebook is open. At the time, you could disable it, and when I was speaking to the clerk, we were chatting about this and she's setting it up, And she said, and I said, you know, people sometimes don't play nice, and you have to be aware that if you open it up to comments, you're gonna get some positive ones, but you're also gonna get negative comments. And she said, nobody is going to put negative comments on our Facebook page. We're a small town, everyone gets along, it's great. I said, okay, let's put together a policy. And it was at the time pretty bare bones. We wanted terms of use. We wanted to inform the public that if you're going to post on this particular page, here are the rules you have to play by. So, you know, it's not for advertising businesses. It's not for political campaigning and these sorts of things. So we put that together, went live. A couple months later, the clerk called me and she said, I have a question. She said, I already know the answer because of what we talked about, but I need to run it through you. She said, the mayor called me and somebody posted something really negative about him. So it was, you know, I think that what the mayor did at the last meeting was really dumb, you know, whatever it was, it's been years and I can't remember, but it was just basically something that you might hear at a village board meeting during public comment. And you know, you open it up to public comment, and not that many people get up to say, you guys are doing a fabulous job. Most of the time, you know, people come to public comment, they have something to tell you. And sometimes it's not positive, it's negative. And that's what this was. This was no different than if this person had gotten up in public comment and said, Mayor, I think you're doing a terrible job. That's what was posted on Facebook. But in this case, the mayor said, I want it removed, and asked the clerk, who was moderating the page, to have it removed. She called me and she said, I know what you're gonna tell me. I know you're gonna tell me that I can't do this, but I want you to tell me this so that then I can go back to the mayor and say, we can't simply remove negative comments. Once you've opened that up, and that's one of the slides we'll talk about, once you've opened that up, there are a lot of ways that you can moderate, you know, threatening speech. You know, speech, First Amendment free speech is not limitless. There are things you can do, but purely negative comments about how you're doing your job or things in the community, we have to be very careful about that. So I'd like to tell that story just to give you a thought of, oh, by the way, the end result was the mayor said, fine, if you won't remove it, shut down the page. Well, they didn't shut down the page. It was kind of one of those things. You get negative comments, and then 2 days later, if you know how Facebook works, it's down, 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 and nobody remembers, and it's kind of gone. And it worked out fine. I think the more, if you're familiar with social media, the more you get involved in it, you'll know that, I mean, this is part of the communication. I'm not here to sell you on social media, and that's what I wanted to start out with. I'm not here to tell you to set up a page. That's a policy issue, not a legal one. So that's the decision that you make. You make as a village to decide whether you want to have an official presence. But I'm here to tell you some of the legal issues that you think in the back of your mind if you decide to do it. Or even if you don't have a formal presence, some of the speech issues with your employees, with your officials, using social media outside of the official government pages that might affect the village, might affect employees or staff members or officials. Those are things just to be aware of. And if you don't know Facebook, and when I first started lecturing, people, I mean, I had people in the audience that had not, and my husband's one of them. He's not on Facebook, he's very much against it, doesn't really know what, but I at that time, you guys know what it is. I had people that were like, I don't even know what you're talking about. I'm sitting in this thinking, you know, whatever, I face what? Insta, huh? Yeah, so. I am going to leave a copy. This is a book that I wrote, I think it's 2 years old now, which doesn't seem that long ago, but in social media world, there's a lot of updates to this book, and we're working on an update. But I'm going to leave it. A lot of what I talk about here is spelled out in much more detail in this book. So I'll leave it with Chris, and then you guys can choose if you want to borrow it. He'll leave the library for the book.
Sure.
So it goes into a lot more depth. Late fees if you don't return.
Yeah, right.
No fees. This is yours, but no one person should hold it. Okay, I'm going to push this the wrong way. Okay, so I know you have the slides, but these are the things that take-home tips. And I like, whenever I give a speech, I like to give take-home tips. Sometimes I give homework. I won't give you guys any homework. But take-home tips to think, what did I get out of this speech? I spent an hour and a half listening to Julie talk about social media. What did I get out of this? And these are kind of 5 things issues that when I do trainings that I like to focus on. One is your government social media, so your YouTube, your Facebook, your Twitter, whatever it is. If it's your site, it's probably a public record. Public record for purposes of FOIA and public record for purposes of records retention. And that second part is really difficult because you don't control Facebook. Facebook controls Facebook. It's a third-party site. If you use it, it's not like your website where you put information on your website and you own that content. You have a contract for that. With Facebook, it's whatever Facebook does with your content once you put it up there. So records retention, FOIA, somebody requests, and I have this all the time, I do a lot of FOIA work, and they'll request FOIA for all of the Facebook posts over the past couple of weeks. And that's difficult because if you're on Facebook, your timeline doesn't show everything that's posted. And so, that FOIA request, along with records retention, makes it a little difficult. Number two, and this is what I already mentioned, is censor, not to censor comments. Doesn't mean that you can't moderate them, doesn't mean that you can't remove them. It means you, as a government, if you have a government site, have to be much more careful. And the way I explain it is, if you have your own private site, if it is purely private, like my home Facebook page, the Julie Tapper Facebook page, if I don't like what somebody's posted on my wall, I can X it out, and I can delete it, or I can hide it, and I have that right. The First Amendment, I am not subject to the First Amendment because I'm not the government. If you have a government page, and that could be YouTube, it could be Twitter, it could be whatever site you're using, you are the government. If it's your official page, or in some cases, if it is thought to be an official page, and that's for records retention, which we'll talk about. In that case, you have First Amendment limits on how you control and moderate that content. And I talked about were just negative comments. You have to be careful. Just as if somebody gets up at public comment at your meeting and they tell you you're doing a bad job. What do? You give them their 3-5 minutes, whatever your rules say. You thank them for their comments, and then you move to the next one. And I think I look at Facebook kind of the same way. Somebody posts something negative. If they're asking a question, you might follow up. If they're just posting a negative comment, maybe you won't thank them for their comment verbally, but that's what you're thinking in your head. And that's kind of how we deal with it. But being careful not to just say, I don't like that comment, click. And another example beside the one I gave you, this was last year, the state of Indiana asked me to come in and train all of their state employees, well, their department heads. So I went to Indianapolis, and there were, I think it was about 900 people that they had in this big auditorium. And so I did, just like this, I did a social media training, and we talked about all of the issues we'll talk about. And at the end of it, I thought, I know that they had known about my book, and so that had been, but I was like, oh, well, thank you for bringing me in. I appreciate it. Was there a reason why you called me in? Was there something pending or some issue that had triggered this? And one of the women who had asked me to come speak said, well, the governor had gotten in some hot water about maybe 2 or 3 months before they called me in for the governor page. So not the state of Indiana Facebook page, but the governor's official governor page on Facebook. And over the summer, he had an intern moderating comments. And the intern was Xing out or deleting every single negative comment that anyone posted about the governor and leaving all of the positive comments. So of course that was caught by the press in this case, and they did a story on it. Look, the governor's Xing out all of these negative comments and keeping all the positive ones. In that case, it wasn't so much a First Amendment issue, but it did get to that heart of not moderating to the point of shutting down people's voices. And from a political standpoint, that was a problem. The third is employees behave badly on social media. If you haven't had an issue yet, good for you. It is probably coming. We see it in police departments, fire departments, public works, the gamut of public and private employees behaving badly. whether it's, and it's usually not on your government sites. We're not seeing people posting things on the city of such and such site. It's usually on their own sites. But maybe they're in uniform, and maybe they're drinking or doing something inappropriate, or maybe they're posting confidential information. I'll give a couple of examples. But I say this is a take-home tip to think you're not immune from this. Our employees are getting younger. My kids are now in their 20s, and they are, going to get out of college, and they are all over social media. And there's not that thought, kind of policing their own thought. Whatever comes into their head seems to come out in Facebook or Instagram or whatever, any of these sites. So we have to think about that and be prepared for that. So whether you're on it or not, you may have made that decision. And I know my husband is not on it, but he is a lieutenant in a fire department, and he said his young guys on his shift are on it. And so he has to deal with this all the time. Number 4, it's a policy. And even if you're not going to set up your own government sites, that's fine. That's your decision. A social media policy, at the very least, for your employees. So if you don't need, maybe you don't need a comment policy because you don't have a site, but setting guidelines for an employee usage, because going back to number 3, your employees behave badly. They just do. Not all of them, obviously. And then number 5 is training. And that's what you're doing today. This is very proactive to think, okay, well, let's at least talk about some of these issues, but also training your employees. If you have any issues that come up, that's a perfect time to say, now it's time to do it. Or I like to recommend being proactive. If you're doing sexual harassment training, you're doing some of the other trainings, you tack on 20 or 30 minutes to remind people, about not disclosing confidential information, not getting in their uniform and doing things or representing that they are employees and acting on the worst thing, having people act on behalf of the village out on their private sites, because there's very little control there. I'm going to keep pushing this the wrong way. Okay, so first, Open Meetings Act. I mentioned this at the beginning. Social media is an electronic communication. So it's very much like text messages and emails. Interactions on social media sites can be subject to Open Meetings Act, and it doesn't have to be on your government site. And the way I like to present this is thinking about your email situation. You can send an email on your Gmail account from your home, and it has nothing to do with the government. But if you send that email to a majority of the quorum, and you start engaging in a discussion through your private emails, regardless of whether or not it's foiable, regardless of whether or not you have to retain that record, if it's a contemporaneous communication electronically, regardless of where it's done, it could trigger the Open Meetings Act. And it's the same way on social media. The way that the public access counselor looks at this, and that's the Attorney General's office that looks at open meetings and FOIA, is, was the communication, was it contemporaneous? There's not a good rule of thumb. Obviously, if it's immediately one after another, or if you pick up, the phone is easy, in person is easy. If we're talking right now, and this is in a meeting, and we're transacting business, that triggers the Open Meetings Act. If somebody emails 3 board members and there's an immediate reply to all, and that's a back and forth, you guys know that. How does that translate to social media? Well, let's say you're on one of your private Facebook pages, or maybe it's a school district or the park district page, whatever it is. If one of you posts and 2 or 3 of you immediately afterwards or contemporaneously, so within what I would say a very short period of time, maybe an hour or 2, where it starts looking like you're communicating about village business. If you're communicating about school business, park business, that you're not a member of that body. But if you're communicating about village business in a contemporaneous fashion on social media, you could have triggered the Open Meetings Act. And I always like to remind, this isn't what you need to train your employees on. You guys, as the members of the public body, are the ones subject to Open Meetings Act. And there are criminal penalties, which I'm sure you know. You have to do your Open Meetings Act training. Those are the things that are important. So remembering that social media is no different. If you conduct yourself in a certain way by your text messages and your emails and your meetings, then think of it the same way on social media. If you post something and 2 days later somebody posts something and 6 hours later somebody posts something, it's probably not contemporaneous. There really has to be some, and we used to always say 2 hours. I don't know if somebody at my firm just kind of said that seemed like a good rule of thumb. We don't have any case on or an opinion on this. It's how would it be perceived by the public? So think of it that way. Would it look like you were communicating or gathering and discussing public business in a meeting setting? So would the public perceive it that way? Then I would say just be careful about that. Freedom of Information Act, and I mentioned this as well, like the Open Meetings Act, electronic communications are subject to FOIA. You already know that. You may have gotten FOIA requests for emails. You may have gotten, for electronic communications already. Probably not social media. I don't see a ton of those, mainly because people can just get on there and see them usually, so they actually FOIA them. But they can. We've had it a couple of times where somebody has FOIA'd something and it was because it was deleted. They saw it, then it was deleted, then they wanted to FOIA it so they could do the aha, see, you did something. So is it going to be subject to release under FOIA? We don't have a PAC opinion on this, but I think the answer based on the definition of electronic communications is yes. The question is it a public record? And is it a public record? Really, it turns on, is it under the control and possession of the public body? Clearly, you have a YouTube channel where you post your
We just
meetings.
recently started posting our meetings within the last 60 days.
Okay, and those are going to be, those are public records. Those are controlled by you, you're posting them. Even though you're putting it on a third-party site, that's a record that you have created, and it's under your control and you're posting it. So certainly that would be subject to FOIA. If you set up a Facebook page, a Village of Cary Facebook page, and you start posting, let's say you're telling people about upcoming meetings and boil orders or whatever it is that you do, those posts and that site are going to be public records. You're creating the content and you're presenting it. It's under your control as much as Facebook can be under your control. But remembering that under the Freedom of Information Act, you provide documents that you actually still have. If Facebook has somehow gotten rid of it, if you know how the timeline works, you don't see everything. If somebody FOIAs it, there's not a lot you can do to recreate it. If Facebook has done whatever their algorithm says that pushes it back. But if you have it and you're able to get it, it's not necessarily very easy to do. Screenshot it, whatever it is. But I think those are the clear answers. So anything that you control, anything that you set up. What becomes a little bit fuzzier, both for FOIA, and then I'll push to records retention, is what if the site or the page is perceived as a government page? It may not be something that you have set up yourself. And the state archivist just issued, a few months ago, issued some guidelines on retention of social media records. And they define, if I can find the language here so I can read it to you, they have defined and set some guidelines on what they consider, what the archivist considers a public record for records retention. And it is if the post or the content is on your official government page, that's the easy one, so it's your own page, or if it is prepared by a employee of the agency in this case, or the government, with the formal or designated duty to publish that. When do we see that? We have, City of Evanston is a good example. I work with them on some social media things. They have employees that are their social media, I mean, it's a bigger city. They have people assigned to do social media, and they do it on the official page, but they also do it on their own. So they have their own Twitter sites where they tweet out information about the city. It's their page, but they're tasked with providing information. So really, they're tasked to do that.
When you, if I might interrupt,
Yeah.
when you say it's their page, you mean City of Evanston's page?
No, it's somebody else's, their personal Twitter page. And we see this at state government too. So the individual is the social media manager or social media director, or, you know, that's their title. So they're in charge of social media. So they not only moderate and administer the official pages, but through their own Twitter page, they advertise or market the city. So they might be the special events, or we've got this event and that event. For the city of Evanston, if that person is officially tasked with being the voice, and so to speak, of the city in that case, then that record, that content that's being created and disseminated is a public record for records retention purposes. It's not clear whether it is for FOIA, but the state archivist makes that distinction. And there's one other, so if it's made on an official public agency account or on a private account that's being used to distribute information for that agency to the public. And that's where it gets into, has the person been, is the person speaking for the municipality? Is the person, disseminating information on behalf of the municipality as opposed to its municipal site? So these are things just to be aware of. If you do have people, if you have employees that are disseminating information, I mean, it doesn't sound like you have a social media director or department or anything like that, but if you have people that are representing or disseminating information, it could be that the state archivist would require you to retain those records. Certainly if it's on your own site, potentially if it's on a private, and that's the language directly from their regulation. So it's something to think about. We don't know how people are going to control that. I would say if you have directed somebody and hired somebody of an employee, then that's something, that's an issue you deal with the employee. If you're creating content on your private site that's about the village, and we, the village, are the ones that have to retain that. We're obligated by law under the Local Records Act to retain it. We've got to find a way to make sure that we have those records and that content. We have some control. We've had situations where, and this was in Evanston, it was another community where they had a social media, it wasn't really an intern, it was an employee in their department who was doing a lot of tweeting and Instagram and YouTube and all of these platforms, and that person left, they quit, and nobody had any of the passwords, and nobody could get into any of these accounts. Nobody could get this content back. Those are other things to think about. If you're going to direct that somebody do this, if it's a record that might have to be retained, it's having multiple people have access to that.
Could you go back to the OMA and the FOIA part there?
Mm-hmm.
So if we have a website and we're updating it now, if we wanted to have, like, Ellen's page and Kim's page and Dave's page, a little column, each month with information from all of us, as soon as 4 of us had information on there, we would be violating the Open Meetings Act?
Well, websites are what is more considered static communication. It's not a give and take.
Okay.
If you're just posting something on there, that's different than engaging in communications with somebody.
Okay.
So you can certainly have different pages. Sometimes you'll have the mayor's page, you'll have a trustee's page. If you're updating it once a month or whatever it is, and it's not a back and forth communication, there's not an Open Meetings Act issue. Is it something that would be subject to FOIA and records retention?
Oh, sure.
Definitely,
Okay.
yeah, just like your website.
Very good.
I'm gonna keep turning this the wrong way. Okay, so this is probably, there are 2 issues that I get called about the most, and I would say this is the number 1 issue is First Amendment, and number 2 is employees behaving badly. So we'll talk about this, which also deals with the First Amendment. But this First Amendment issue that is not employee, it's the public, it's people commenting, it's people posting on your government pages. The first question that you have to ask yourself before you get to the First Amendment issue is the site Is the site a public forum? Is it a public site subject to the First Amendment laws? Because as I said, my private site, my personal Facebook page, there's not a First Amendment issue there. I am not the government. So I can pick and choose what I post on there from just this is the page that I want to present to the world. If I don't like what people say, I can X it out. It's different if it's a government page, and we have to be careful about picking and choosing the type of speech that we like. Just like we can't do it at a meeting. We can't do it if it's a public forum. So if you have a particular area that you allow people to post, whatever it is, or let's say you have a newsletter and you let people advertise. It's not about picking and choosing the speech that you like. So first is it subject to the First Amendment, and then second, are the postings protected by the First Amendment? And the answer is yes. So if it is a government page, if it is a government site, then it is going to be protected by the First Amendment, and people that post on there have those protections. And my take-home tip is don't be South Pittsburgh, because this was a great example. In South Pittsburgh, they were setting up a Facebook page, and I think they had a couple of other sites too, and they adopted a policy, which is good, very proactive to say, you know what, we're going to get a terms of use set before we open all this up to the public. The problem is their policy banned all negative comments. And basically when the commissioners were talking about it, when they adopted it, they said, well, the first thing everyone wants to say is I can't post anything on Facebook. This was the defense of, you can't do that. And he said, well, of course you can. You just can't say anything bad about us. And the policy talked about no negative comments about South Pittsburgh, no negative comments about the commissioners, the employees, the whole board, everybody. So it was just basically, if you have something nice to say, stick around. If you don't, you violated our policy. And you can't do that. This was clearly a government site. You can't just pick and choose the speech that you like. Again, there are definitely types of comments that you can post or that you can moderate and remove. And you need to make that clear. So before you were to set up any kind of site where you allowed people to comment, you would want to have a comment policy in place. And I feel pretty strongly that whatever else you do, that if you're going to open it up, is that you inform people of the type of content that you have the ability to remove. And it takes it away if you ever get, you're in a lawsuit and you're defending the First Amendment. If you're able to say they violated rules 3 and 5 of the comment policy, and we reserve the right to remove that, and it is what it is. First Amendment doesn't protect every type of speech. It protects certain kinds of speech. So you have to inform the public of what's allowed or not. So some of these things, one of the take-home tips that I would say, a lot of people adopt a policy, a comment policy, and they put it in a drawer and nobody knows about it, and you're not really doing any good informing people of the kind of behavior you are allowing. Make sure it's posted on the social media site, even if it's a shortened version, or better yet, post a link to your website, because you control your website, and then you can update it and you can make sure that you've got that. And then being very specific. And so here's an example, and you won't be able to read all of this. It's like I'd need two, glasses to read all of this. But these are just examples. If you've got a bigger slide, you might be able to see it a little better. But these are some of the comments that it's been upheld by either a court or some agency, and this is various cases around the country, that have upheld removing content that fits within any one of these categories. So let's say that it is profane or obscene. Let's say that somebody is threatening or soliciting business. You don't have to open up your page to people linking to their eBay account so that they can sell you, pens or something. You don't have to do that.
Does Facebook have to have where people can comment?
They do now. It used to be many, many years ago, you could open up a Facebook page, a government Facebook page or a community page,
Yeah.
and disable comments.
And just have it be like a
And it would just be on
point
a
of
website,
information.
you would just hit right. And that's not available anymore. Facebook wants that, that more interaction and communication.
So it's gotta be monitored then.
Yeah, if you're gonna have a site, you do.
Okay.
You need to have some kind of terms of use, and then you probably do need to moderate it and administer it. So these are encouraging illegal activity, spam. I think especially if you're, advertising businesses, it's not really what the intent of your page is, unless it's an economic development page, which I've seen. Some cities have put together just a Facebook page for economic development, and they are promoting the businesses and vacant properties and opportunities. That's fine. This is more somebody posting a link to, a Tupperware party or something along those lines. That's not really what your page is about, and so if you have that as one of your policies, you just remove it. This is another important one, and this is the political campaign. You have to be very careful when you're talking about, and you guys already know this, that there's Prohibited Political Activities Act and then the State Ethics Act that prohibits the use of village resources to promote any candidate or campaign. And using your social media site, if it's a government site, even if it's not costing you any money, it's using staff time, and that's resources. So having that information, so we always say, certainly you can't do it from the government side, but if other people are posting as well, if you have a policy that says, we don't allow that on our site because we have legal restrictions on anyone, say somebody says, vote for so-and-so, and they have all their candidate information, that we just, if we have a rule, we just say, just remove it. We're not picking and choosing the political speech. We're saying we can't have that on our site because we have legal restrictions on use of village resources to promote that. We haven't seen a case on that, on whether or not that's an issue. The worst thing you could do is pick and choose the political speech. Better to either allow it all or not allow any of it, obviously, than to pick that. And then violation of any copyright or trademark. These are kind of the obvious ones. You won't notice the South Pittsburgh number 14, which says, no critical speech against the village board or you just have to be careful about that. Copyright issues, this is something I just mentioned kind of quickly. I think this happens a lot more with when you have your interns running, or you have, kind of your young people running your social media sites. They're not necessarily thinking about the stuff that they're posting, and we've seen it where they're just taking pictures off of wherever, photographs that they didn't take, and posting them. I need a picture of a park. I'm advertising a park, and they just pick one off the internet and post it. There are cases out there where governments and other people have been socked with tens of thousands of dollars in fines and fees because somebody owned the copyright to that photograph and they didn't ask for permission to do it. And the response is always, well, it's fair use, it's on the internet, you can use it. And that is not the case. It's not just because it's on the internet, anyone can use it. There's still copyright issues and ownership issues, permission. My advice is create your own content. I deal with this a lot in the park realm. We represent a lot of park districts, and they use social media a ton to advertise. They have 100 programs a week, and they want to get the message out. So I say, if you want to post pictures of dancing or parks or skating or whatever it is, then take a picture and post your picture because you own that. So there's not a question of copyright because you own it. Now, photographs. This is the second issue that kind of comes up with that. Okay, so create your own content. I took a picture of a bunch of kids at a ice skating party, and then I posted it. Problems with that, and you may or may not have these issues since you don't have your own sites. Certainly you have the right to tape your meetings and post those. You don't have to get permission because it's an open meeting, and the Open Meetings Act authorizes it to be taped. But some of your other events, I did this, let's say we had an Easter egg hunt and a bunch of pictures of kids, we didn't get releases or we didn't get in trouble. Most of the time we say if it's a registration program, try to get a release. If it's more of a public event and it's just kind of open, just post a sign. Just let people know. if you're gonna take pictures, whether it's for a brochure, whether it's for your newsletter, whether it's for, your social media sites, just let them know. This is one of the releases that actually was in a lot of the programs for recreation departments. And it's great, it's very broad, except it doesn't say anything about social media or the internet. And what we found working with park districts is people had no problem with their kids' pictures in the brochures, but they started having a real problem with their kids' pictures being posted on Facebook without them knowing. And not everybody, because a lot of people are posting pictures of the kids, who cares? But there are people that feel really uncomfortable with that. So it's just letting people know. You're gonna have a program here, you're gonna take some pictures of people. Do you have to sit, and I would say, don't over-lawyer these things. You don't have a 10-page release and make everyone sign it. But we do this at pools, at public pools, we just post a sign, that we could take your picture by being here and by participating in this program, we may take your picture and we may use it in our promotional. Please let us know if you're not comfortable with that. So it's an opt-out as opposed to a release and an opt-in. I wanted to just touch on this. This has been a big issue in the news lately. We've been seeing a lot of this. This happens more, I think, this is probably less of an interest to, we're going to set up a site or we're going to do anything, more of an interest to my board members. Most of my clients, the elected board members, are always asking about this because I'm sure, maybe not in your community, but in some of my communities, they have the newspaper sites and they have the comments and the topics and the patch.com and whatever. And people sometimes aren't really complimentary of how you guys are doing business. Maybe they disagree with a decision or whatever it is. That sometimes they're saying things about you. And most of those forums are anonymous. They're doing away with that a little bit with the newspapers and requiring people to sign into Facebook to post. But there are still places where, whether it's blogs or whatever it is, where people post anonymously. So I get a lot of questions, can we find out who this is? And you'll hear some of this in the news. People will be asking Google or Comcast or the service provider to turn over the IP address and the identity of that person. And there's a lot of cases on this. I mean, so many cases, it's crazy, but they all end up with the same standard. And basically, you can get to the identity of an anonymous poster if you can show that their conduct, whatever they posted about you, meets the standard for defamation.
Who do I have to show that to? Comcast?
Yeah, you have, yes. Well, first you ask, you have to make a request to whoever the service provider is, and then they will typically deny it, and they'll say, get a court order, and then you have to go to court and show the judge that here's the post, and here's why I think it meets the standard for, you don't have to prove it at that point, because you'll sue them. That's usually what you're trying to do is find out who you want to sue. I mean, that's what these cases are. But you have to show the judge that at least you have a case, because they're not just going to release these identities without some kind of, not full evidence, but at least some small bit of evidence that you've got a case to move forward. Otherwise, we might as well just release everybody's names. So that's really, when it gets to that point, it's not easy to get it. A ton of cases out there. The conduct's got to be pretty egregious, especially for you guys, for public officials. You're under a different standard. People can be meaner to you than they can to the average non-elected, non-public official. So the standards are pretty high. Okay, so this is a question that I get sometimes, and sometimes it's a misleading site or a parody site. I don't know if you guys read in the newspaper about the Peoria mayor who had, the Peoria mayor, somebody set up a parody Twitter account, and I can't remember what it was maybe it was at Peoria mayor, whatever it was, it looked like it was the mayor's official site with the mayor's picture, but it was somebody that just set that up and was tweeting out. So the question is that a official Peoria mayor page or mayor site? And in that case, the answer is no. It's a parody site, which is different. What the court said was, it was so clear, this Peter, it was so clear that he was making fun and that he was parodying the mayor as opposed to pretending to be the mayor. The tweets were outrageous. And we see this, I mean, if you type in Barack Obama in Twitter, there'll be like 1,000 Barack Obama Twitter accounts. Only one of them is his. The rest of them are, you know, Mr. President or President Obama. The name itself looks very much like the president, but when you start looking at the tweets, you can tell. And that's what the court will look like. Is this, whatever site it is, that's not sanctioned by the government, so someone else is operating it, but it looks like a government site, is it a parody site, like a satire site? Or is it very clear that it's not a government site? Or is it misleading? And those are the things that when we look at these. So, and is there authority to represent the government? Is there government control over the site? So these are the things that the courts will look at to say, yes, this is an official site, and now you're subject to all of those rules, the Open Meetings Act, FOIA, Records Retention, First Amendment. Or no, it is so very clearly not an official site that it's a private site and you don't have to worry about it. And it's not a black and white issue. So often you've got to look at the site and, you know, are there clear disclaimers? Is it so obvious from the tweets that came out by the Peoria mayor that this really wasn't the mayor? Because he was making fun of himself in a really outrageous way. So those are the things that you know, we have to look at.
Can I ask you a question?
Sure.
So let's just say, because I've had this discussion with fellow trustee here, let's say that a site may be perceived as if it looks like it. You got the picture of the Village of Cary, and that's the site. Because I have people, a lot of times coming up to me, and I've talked, I'm not trying to say anything that I haven't chatted directly with someone about, that, so people assume that it is as a site with all that on it. So I assume, like, for example, that I can't post on that, I can't say anything on it, because then I'm gonna be an Open Meetings Act violation if two of them are on it and then I chime in on something.
Well, even if it's a private site, you could, the Open Meetings Act is an issue,
Right.
just like if
That's
you were at
what I was
Starbucks all sitting in, if you left here and went to Starbucks and talked business. So, but from First Amendment, you know, if a court deemed it to be a government site, then the First Amendment kicks in, and Open Meetings Act, and, well, Open Meetings Act anyway, but FOIA, records retention, all of those other legal issues that you have to think about. When I had a community where they had an official village page, and then there was another page that looked awfully like the official page. It had, I think they were using the logo, and there were some other, but it was run by kind of a group in the community that was not in favor of what the government was doing. And that was a question of, is this, and this was something that the village ended up taking to Facebook and asked Facebook to disband it. They first contacted the person that was running it and said, just post a very clear disclaimer, you know, right at the top of the page, so people that go to the homepage can see this is not the official Village of Island, or Village of, you know, so. Yeah, so this is not their official page. And then they asked them to actually link to the official page. So it would be, if you know, if you want that, that's here and come back in that case. If you don't have one, that wouldn't work. But the clearer that the disclaimer is, so that the people can see, the more likely you're not going to get into a court situation where someone says, that looks like the village page, and so the First Amendment applies, and you can't censor the speech, and you have to retain these records. So that's what I would say, and that's what we requested in this case, was just post a really clear disclaimer that it's not the official page. And usually it's not a problem. You know, in that case, if it is, then if it is really misleading, and they usually aren't, it's not usually, in some cases, it's actually pretending to be.
Sure.
Most of the time it's not, it's just maybe people are perceiving it that way.
Sure.
I think a disclaimer is probably the best way to go, just very clear at the top. Anyone else before I talk about?
Just to say, several trustees, I was talking to a couple from Huntley last
last night, and they said that they have individual Facebook pages. And that they leave it to just, one trustee, and then that way, if he says, hey, everybody come on up, the police department's having a bike safety day, and then, Sue will chime in and say, and, we're also gonna teach you how to put in your safety seats. And so that's how they avoid, the open meetings.
Well, I would still say your Open Meetings Act violations can happen anywhere. They don't have to be on an official page. So if you even are on your personal Facebook page and 3 of you are communicating contemporaneously on a personal Facebook page, it could violate the Open Meetings Act.
Okay.
So that would not, that might take care of some of the other issues and concerns, but it wouldn't, well, 2 people are fine. You guys know, you can leave here and you could spend the next 6 hours talking one-on-one to each other about anything you want, how you're gonna vote, business, for whatever reason, the act does not apply to 2 of you. But once you add a 3rd, then you have an Open Meetings Act issue.
But what if I put that disclosure up there that this is my page, Dave Chapman's page?
It's
not
still,
a
because the
village
Open
area.
Meetings Act can happen anywhere. It could happen at Starbucks. It could happen at, school function. If it's the discussion of public business, contemporaneously, if you post something and then someone else posts something 2 hours later, and then it's kind of it's not a back and forth, but it's one and then someone else,
Okay.
and then a day later somebody. But if it starts looking like a communication,
Yeah.
like somebody is talking, one of you is talking to 2 others. So if 3 of you are going back and forth on something, that's when you get into some potential issues. And I will say, having dealt with the public access counselor at the Attorney General's office, they take these issues, both FOIA and Open Meetings Act, very seriously. And they are very conservative. The Attorney General, not the courts as much, but the Attorney General is very conservative. So I haven't seen a social media case yet, but I've definitely seen text messages and emails. And if it is, looks like people are talking to each other, having a conversation, that I think that they would find a violation. And again, it wouldn't help to be on a private page.
Where do you fall on the Ron Emanuel suit where the Tribune is suing him for his phone records? I mean, that's one elected official talking to a developer or whatever. I mean, that's not.
Yeah, well, there's a case out of Champaign, and the Attorney General says that any one of you communicates on your own, even if it's on your own cell phone that you don't get reimbursed for, that doesn't go through the system. The Attorney General took the position that if you are a public official, that's foiable, and anyone can get it. That went to court, and the court said not quite. And the court limited it just a bit and said the FOIA applies to the public body. It doesn't apply to individuals. The Open Meetings Act applies to individuals. Any one of you could be violating the Open Meetings Act individually, but FOIA is as a body. So on a private, if it's a private cell phone and the messages are not going through the City of Chicago system,
Right.
and he's paying for it himself, he gets reimbursed. That's different. He's paying for it himself, and he's not emailing during a meeting, and he's not sharing it with other members of the city
Right.
council, then it shouldn't be a FOIA.
Okay.
It shouldn't be FOIable.
That's what I thought too.
That's what the case says.
Right.
So, and it's fairly recent, I mean, within the last year or so.
Okay.
So, but there could be we don't know all the facts
Right,
in that
right,
case,
right.
so.
Yeah.
And maybe he did share it with somebody else. Somebody knew about it.
I've got to ask you a question.
Mhm.
How do you identify, because I mean, this issue with Open Meetings Act is an immediate issue. How do you identify who it is and how contemporaneous that this actually is?
Yeah.
I mean, there's administrators to sites, and one trustee goes on the site and says something, how do you know who the administrator is for real? I mean, how does that come out in court or at the
Yeah.
public access council? How do you even?
It's hard
It's
on
still the
social media. It's a little easier on email, because email, you can get that record from the service provider, whether it's your official, if it's the official carry account's really easy. I'm sure you just can go and get it.
Yeah.
You just ask your IT people to just download it. If it's on Gmail, then you contact Google. I mean, emails are easy. Even text messages have become pretty easy. You can just subpoena the phone provider. And they
I'm
provide
talking
those
about
records.
social media.
Well, that's what I'm getting, that social media is much more difficult. Can you get it yourself? Well, you can only see what's actually shown. What Facebook has an algorithm, and I am just techie enough to know that I don't understand it. And I actually went to a Facebook seminar on how they determine their formula and their algorithm for what you see in the timeline. And it was like this big, how many people it's going to reach, and have you talked about this before? Because then it's a second time. I mean, it's like this crazy formula. So you don't see everything in your wall. If you have Facebook, and some people may be posting stuff, and it doesn't meet the algorithm. It's not showing up. So in a case like this, if you get a complaint, that the public access counselor contacts you and says, we have a complaint that board members are violating the Open Meetings Act on Facebook by having a contemporaneous discussion. And what they'll ask you to do is provide all of those records. Because it's the public body that gets notified. How do you do that? If it's not your site, it makes it really difficult. I'm not sure how cooperative Facebook will be, quite honestly. I mean, I had to contact them. We had that one situation where it was a fake village site, and they did shut that down. They are sometimes cooperative, but on something like that, are they going to go back and, the difficulty in recreating all of that, it's tough, especially if you don't control it. You're not the administrator of the site, so, what I say is, if you are going to have your own site, the village is going to have your own site, and you're going to create content to put on there, you create it in another forum, Word, and then post it. And the reason is because then for records retention, we don't know what happened with Facebook, but we have it here. But if it's someone else's site, you don't have that. It does make it difficult. It makes it very difficult, and I don't have a good answer for it. If the public access, you tell them, basically, we did the best we could. Some places have hired, that have, and it's usually bigger cities, that have multiple social media platforms. They may have 5 Twitter accounts and multiple Facebook accounts, police, fire. They hire or a consulting firm called Archive Social. And it's unbelievable what they do, but they retain every single piece of social media that's a government site. So if you get subpoenaed, if you get FOIA or whatever, you have that. My clients aren't paying that much money for something like that. So we're in Attorney General, we will provide you with what we have, and that's the best we can do. Anything else before we talk about, and when I talk about employees, it's employees and officials too, to some extent. When we talk about discipline, obviously elected officials very different than appointed or officials, and very different from employees. But some of the issues are very similar. So here's one, this is my favorite, I always lead with this one. And this is just one of those, starting out, kind of stepping back from the employee realm. Not everything an employee says is First Amendment protected. And this is what I hear every day, all the time. Whenever social media stuff comes up, and even my kids, who should know better, will say, well, I can say what I want, it's protected by the First Amendment. First Amendment said, no. You can say what you want. Nobody's, no one's got duct tape over your mouth. But that doesn't protect you from the consequences of your speech, because not all speech is First Amendment protected. So here's an example. I wish I could get fired some days. It would be easier to be at home than to have to go through this. And of course, this person was fired. Their coworker, and I tell everybody this, your coworkers will rat you out every day of the week. And this is what happens. Whether it's here, whether it's your friends on the board, whether it's somebody in the community, whatever it is, somebody's going to tattle on you. Every example that I have of employees getting in trouble, one of their coworkers turned them in. And I tell my kids this. They'll say, well, I don't have, my bosses aren't friends with me. I don't friend my bosses. And I said, it's not your bosses that are gonna turn you in. It's one of your coworkers who you thought was your friend, who decided to rat you out for whatever reason, and that's what happened here. So of course, this person got fired. Is this First Amendment protected speech? Not at all. You don't have a First Amendment right to gripe about your job. So you can be fired for that, and this person was. And sued, and the court said, griping, not protected speech. And this is a similar. I start my new job today, but I absolutely hate working in daycare. Of course, she was working in daycare. Her new employer saw it on her first day and sent her home. She sued and said, I have First Amendment protected speech. And they said, this isn't protected speech. You know, do we want somebody working in daycare that hates daycare? No. This is more kind of a government, and this is a real example where a dispatcher was, you know, one of your dispatchers sitting at the screen, takes a screenshot, posts this on Facebook with all of the information, nothing redacted out, because he thought that the medical emergency was funny. And he said, you know, look at what I have to deal with every day. You know, these are the HIPAA, you know, any confidentiality patient, just completely inappropriate, very embarrassing for the department. He was fired and sued. Every one of these that they sued. And the court said, there's no protected speech here, you know? There is a First Amendment, but this is not protected speech. It's okay to discipline somebody for something like this. So these are just a few examples, or not examples, but guidelines. So what can you discipline for employees? Excessive use of social media at work. I had a client who was suspected, just thinking, wow, this employee is really not very productive. Every time we need filing done or we need this done, she's always too busy. But we can't figure out, you know, she's got the same workload as these other people and what. So they monitored her computer, and she was spending 7 hours a day. 7 hours, and she worked 7 hours, but she was an 8-hour employee with a, you know, lunch break and that. 7 hours a day playing Candy Crush. Well, pretty much the whole day, or what, I think it was Candy Crush and some other game.
What's
You
that?
can fire. You what?
I said, what's that?
Yeah, right.
Yeah. Well, nowadays, people don't do it. Some of the employees have gotten smarter because they know that they're being monitored, and they do it on their phone in their lap. So, and even that's okay. Because you pay your employees to do your work. You pay them to be working. And unless they're a social media manager or they're testing, you know, game tester, that's probably not in their job description. And it's fine. You can discipline and terminate them. Disclosing confidential information like the dispatcher, obviously. If you have, let's say you have an employee who is posting, and I have this, posting executive session meeting minutes before they're released to the public, or posting attorney-client memos. And they're getting this information and posting it on their blog. That's not protected speech. That's confidential information. Making false statements about the employer. It's okay and this is where you get into protected activities, it's okay to talk about working conditions. There are protections that goes back to the start of unions. There are labor protections, not griping about your job, not complaining about your boss, but real working conditions. An example is, my boss makes me work overtime all the time and I never get paid for it. I have to stay an extra hour every night. I have to work through lunch. Those are violations of labor laws. And if somebody posted about that, that's okay. They have the right to do that. They have protection, labor protections. Public employees have an additional layer of protection to speak about matters of public concern, but it's actually pretty limited. It's not just, well, if it relates to the village, I can talk about it. It really has to be a real matter of public concern. Some of it goes back to that kind of labor, working conditions and that. And some of it might go to, my boss is, you know, violating the state ethics law by making me work on his or her campaign while I'm at working hours. We know that's a violation of state law. That's a matter of public concern because that public official, by asking an employee to work on his or her campaign, is violating state law. And that's the kind of, that's protected. They can speak about that and you can't discipline them for that. But individual gripes, personal attacks, those sorts of things, not protected. So, you know, calling your boss an idiot, unless it's paired with my boss is an idiot, because he's making me work overtime and not paying me and doesn't know that I'm gonna sue him. I mean, you know, it's like, how does it all fit in? But just complaining about your job, there's no protection for that. You can discipline people for that. Again, making sure that you have a policy in place that talks about excessive use of social media, that you know, prohibits them from doing these sorts of things. And it doesn't always have to be social media. You may already have personnel, and everybody has a personnel manual, that might already talk about tech use, internet usage, and you know, whether it's zero tolerance or we allow some personal use that. If people are violating your policies, then you can discipline them for that. So just to kind of sum up some of the things I talked about at the beginning, and these are the, why should you consider a social media policy? And this isn't a sales job. This is having been on the opposite side of the challenge in the case with a community that didn't have a social media policy and try to defend actions. If you have something in writing that your employees know, or that your people that are commenting know, I'll tell you, your lawyer will be much happier stepping up in court and defending your action if you have something in the basis for that. It's just like your zoning code. You make a zoning decision, you can point to language in the code. So these are the reasons that are important. And I would say draft your purpose statement first. The reason is you're trying to present to the public and to your employees why you have a policy or why you're setting up a Facebook site. It's not to advertise people's businesses. It's not to serve as, you know, a personal attack page against the government officials. It's not for that. But really, it's to disseminate information. That's everybody I work for. That's why they set up social media. They want to engage the public. They want to provide more information to the public about the goings on. It's a transparency issue. It's here's more information. We have a website. We do newsletters. We have all this other information. But this is just another avenue for that. So everything kind of goes around to that. Yes.
So is that idyllic? Is that a wish? Is that Disneyland? Or does that actually happen? I mean,
No,
I
it's,
see there's a policy, but I can also see if I have a Facebook page for the village, that people are gonna write, the village sucks.
they do. More of it is to support or defend your decisions if they're ever challenged.
Okay.
Do people really look at this and say, well, you know,
Oh,
I guess the
yeah.
purpose is disseminate information, so I'm not really going to post anything? But they will.
All right.
But if you're challenged, if you remove somebody's comment, and you have a policy in place that says, this is what we're trying to do here, and we have this terms of use, and you have violated it, and you have to go in court and defend it, then the court's going to look at, well, this is why this is in place. This is why they're doing this, and that is supported by the comment policy, and you violated it, and that's not a violation of the First Amendment. So it all just kind of ties together.
Great.
This, I just want to go right down to the take-home tip, and this is the Indiana governor, which was all over the news a year or two ago, but don't put your intern in charge of any of your social media sites. It's okay for your intern to work on it, and I use intern loosely, just an employee that is not management level, that doesn't understand and hasn't been in this training and understand the legal issues. My kids would be terrible at it. I mean, they'd be fantastic at social media. They are. They use it all the time. But they would be terrible at knowing that, I mean, that's what they would do. They would look at a site and say, oh, that's not very nice. Click, delete. I mean, you know, there's not that thought of, you know, how does this implicate? We're in the government. We know that we have limitations on what we do. We know that we have all these laws we have to apply to. Your interns, your younger employees, they may be great at creating content, but they're probably not the best for moderating it. So that's what I would say. It is to be careful about that. And you should have, I would say, have one person that's kind of the overseer if you do set up any pages. And it's true, you have YouTube anyway. Somebody to you know, the buck stops at that person to know the rules and also to be trained. The employee policy, the reason for this, and this is something that we do, and we put it into the personnel manual, it's all part of the rules of being an employee of the village or the city. And this, an employee policy, and I mentioned this before, is important whether you have a government page or not. because your employees are on social media. And they may be doing it at work, or they may be doing it at home, but they may be talking about their job. We saw it, and again, I bring up park districts because they have so many temp employees and so many young employees. So the park districts have, thousands of seasonal kids. My kids both work for a park district, lifeguard and all of that. And they have their phones with them all the time. So they're taking pictures in their uniforms with other kids and posting them on their personal, and they don't think anything of that. Here's little Johnny, I'm teaching him to swim today. Not thinking because no one's told them and trained them. Have a policy, train them on what's appropriate or not. Most of the park districts we represent now, they do lifeguard training. You have to train these kids. They spend 5 or 10 minutes on what you can and can't do. You can't, you shouldn't wear your uniform and take pictures and post them. You can't take pictures of patrons and post them on your, it doesn't take that long to kind of set that information out. So the employee policy will deal with, if you have an official page, what they can and can't do there, what they can and can't do on the job and on your equipment. And I separate those because sometimes they have their own phones. See this a lot, they'll have their own phone in their lap, so they might be doing that. So, dealing with that. And then outside of work, because just because they're outside of work, they can still be disciplined for their activities, their social media activities, if it comes back and harms or hurts you, as long as it's not protected speech. So again, that's the being very careful about not there. And we always say, contact your labor attorney or contact your village attorney before you fire somebody for social media because of kind of all of these legal implications. And these are just some of the guidelines that I would say. Here's a take-home tip. This is just after having, I think a lot of communities have adopted these actually just employers have adopted the zero tolerance policies. You cannot use our computers, you're at a computer all day, you cannot use them at all, 0% personal use. And what we have found, it's not scientific, but just working with any number of different employers, is that the more strict your policy is, the more time they spend on their own device, which is actually more distracting than if you had a minimal use policy. So you allow people, at my firm, it says minimal use. So if somebody checks Facebook at 9 o'clock when they get in and they spend, 3 minutes going down the wall and then they work the rest of the day, we're not disciplining them. If somebody spent no time on the computer because we prohibit it and spend 2 hours on their phone because we don't know what's going on, that's far more distracting. So it's that's a balancing thing. They're legal. Zero tolerance policy is perfectly legal. So if that's what you do, that's fine. If you do, you have to enforce them or never enforce them. You have to enforce them equally because what will happen is you will enforce it against somebody. You will terminate them and they will sue you and say, are you kidding me? Every single one of the people in that department was on Facebook all the time. You knew about it and you singled me out. So that's another trouble with the zero tolerance is you get into that catch-22. Either you never enforce it or everybody gets fired. So monitoring is legal. You probably already know this. You can monitor your employees on your equipment. You own it, but make sure that they know that. Most employees do, but not all. Actually, I would say if I told my kids, hey, by the way, when you guys get a job out of college, your employer will know what you're doing on the internet, they would probably be surprised by that. Most of us know that our employers can monitor what we do. So, and it's very easy. My IT department can in 5 minutes tell me how long somebody was on this site, this site, this site the day before. So it's not difficult to do. You want to make sure that they know that. It's probably already you have an internet use policy or computer use policy, but making sure that they know it. I like that they sign an acknowledgement because then when they violate it, or when you monitor them and get them on a violation, and they will always say, you don't have the right to look at what I'm doing. And of course you do. It's your equipment, so you do have the right to monitor. And then training, we talked about this, not just your seasonal employees, not just your young employees, but just having a regular you already have, there's so many different things you already have to train your employees, adding a few minutes on appropriate computer use, good idea. You know, we can monitor you, whether it's zero tolerance or minimal use, this is what that means. 5 minutes a day is fine, 2 hours, 7 hours on Candy Crush is not. You have a job to do, that's why you're here, so that's what we expect, productive employees. And also that they're not, their conduct outside of work is not affecting your business and what you do and the reputation that you have in the community, so I think 15 more minutes, but there are my questions, and kind of opened it up for questions throughout, but I'm happy to spend a little time if anyone has any follow-up, any other issues that you think I missed.
I have a question about responding to, for instance, if we were to adopt a Facebook page and people make comments that are, you know, whatever, they're not favorable to whatever it is. Do we have an obligation, or is it permitted that we would respond to that to correct the situation, or you just let it ride, you just don't
Yeah,
engage?
well,
What's typical?
from a legal perspective, you don't. There's no legal requirement. It's kind of like a public comment. You know, when somebody stands up at public comment, you do not have to answer questions. The Attorney General said public comment is comment, not debate, not question and answer. So same with your social media sites, you have no obligation to respond to them. I did a conference, a 3-day conference out in Reno, and it was all social media for governments. And I went to a class. I thought it was actually fantastic, and it wasn't the legal so much, it was more practical. We have all of these people that it's almost like filing tickets for service requests, but they're using Facebook to do this. I have a pothole here, or, you know, they're, instead of using the regular call the manager, you know, somebody, they're posting it on Facebook, and they really are expecting some action to be taken. So what these folks were saying, and these were in some cases bigger cities, so they were seeing much more volume in this. They weren't necessarily responding substantively on Facebook. So it wasn't, you know, there's a problem, there's a pothole here, or I contacted the city and they're not responding to my concerns about, you know, the flooding in this area and you know, whatever it is. That it wasn't, okay, here's the answer and this and that. It was as simple as so-and-so will contact you, you know, to talk to you about your problem, or thank you for bringing this to our attention. Please contact, you know, Public Works or Streets or whoever it is, but addressing each one of them that was either asking a question or raising an issue that if it was brought to you at a meeting, you would address. So it's more along that line. What they did say is engaging if it's purely critical. There's no question and there's no follow-up. It's just, you guys are doing a really terrible job. What these folks who've been doing this for years said is, it was better not to respond. They had tried it both ways. They had tried always responding in a positive way, and what ended up happening is, it worsened it. It would turn into a debate and a back and forth. So it's kind of sometimes knowing the person or knowing the audience. If it's somebody you know and you can reach out to them in a different forum, you want to address their concerns. You want to find a way to respond to it. Responding through social media, at least from their experience, it wasn't working. You know, they kind of tried all these different ways of, you know, they wanted to be as you know, responsive as they could be, but getting into this big, long discussion in Facebook was much less helpful than picking up the phone and contacting the person or telling them where they could go to get an actual, you know, live being. Or, you know, if you have a service request, kind of, you know, here's where you can file that, and we respond within 24 hours or whatever it is. So there's no good legal answer, just experience from how other communities are doing it. And I would encourage you, if you end up doing it, talk to some of your neighboring communities that maybe have had Facebook for a few years. How did you deal with this, and what worked? You know, what were the tools that, so you're not starting from, oh my gosh, you know.
And one more question. In previous IML conferences I went to, it wasn't necessarily the social media, it was more of the emerging, with the cell phones and laptops and iPads that people have up at the dais, or the dais, whatever you want to call it. But that's all. If people in the audience are witnessing board members utilizing their own personal devices during a board meeting, is that subject to FOIA?
Well, that's the Champaign-Macklin case that came down, and the court would say yes, that if elected officials, and I don't think even appointed officials, so members of a public body, if they are texting, and this was exactly what happened in Champaign, there were city council members and they were texting during the city council meeting, and somebody in the audience, I think it was a reporter, saw that, wanted copies of those text messages, filed a FOIA, city denied it and said that's not a public record because we don't pay for their cell phones, they're private. It went through the public access counselor first, made it all the way to the appellate court, and the appellate court said there are 3 situations where communications on a private device will turn into a public record. The general rule is if it's on a private device, it's not a public record. But there are 3 times that it will turn into one, subject to FOIA, and doing it during a meeting was one of them. And what the court said is, if you're texting during a meeting, you're acting as a public body. You're already in the meeting, if it's your meeting. I mean, if you're sitting in the audience, you're a ZBA member at the city council, different issue. If it's your meeting and you're texting, then you are acting as that public body and it's FOIAble. The other situations are if you forward your text message or email to and from an official account, it seems obvious because it's on the official account, of course it's FOIAble, subject to exemptions, of course. And then if you text or email between a majority of the body, which I would not suggest you do because that's an Open Meetings Act issue. So really the issue with during the meeting is the court, and that's an appellate court decision, that applies throughout the state. It is a public record and it could be FOIAble.
Anyone else have any other questions?
I do have a couple, but I think we need to talk about some real issues. One is from the standpoint of the village board's viewpoint of a public Facebook and or Twitter site for the Village of Cary. It's kind of been not directly discussed, quite honestly, over the years, and I'd just rather discuss it and get your feedback. I have some personal opinions about it as the administrator, but I just wanted to hear from the board now how you feel about it. I know many of us have different experiences in the private sector and public sector, but I'd like to talk about it if the board's willing. Any thoughts on that component?
Do you even have the staff to run the village?
Well, I've looked at other communities that I've worked for, and I have experience with in terms of watching how they use it, and I'm quite honestly trying to be more open-minded. I've been fairly closed-minded today here because of what you just asked. I see Glenview, and I see they have a communications person. That person does not do social media all day. She writes press releases, she has internal communications things, it's a small segment. And it floors me. I mean, they have a Facebook site and they do a lot of like one-way communications out to the citizens about public events, different drop-off days for prescriptions, things like that, And somehow they only have like 700 likes. They're a town of almost 50,000 people. So somehow they figured out how to communicate one way out where it doesn't appear to be administratively impossible. A lot of what I've seen through Northern Illinois University, I was able to go to the master's program back in the spring, and essentially we reviewed master's papers from all students, and one of the speeches was on social media. Intern from Geneva gives a presentation, and that person is the administrator essentially for Geneva's website. I couldn't believe it. Just great presentation, but I was like, how do you do this 24/7? What happens if you have like an F4 storm event? Do you do that? And those are the things that just concern me about creeping into the environment. It's the 24/7 aspect of it. It's the decentralized aspect of it with departments that greatly concerns me. Not that we don't trust our people, but it adds an element to their emergency operations here in a lean staffing environment. That worries me. From the standpoint of a high level, kind of one way out, you know, Facebook about meetings or about, like the great example is the Public Works Day we had, where we had drop off. I mean, I would have loved to put that out. I wouldn't have loved to have spent, you know, a lot of time going back and forth with people, but I couldn't imagine that that would be the case. So limited use, I could see, and I think we could figure out a way to sustain that. But I guess I would, I don't guess, I tell you, I would recommend more of a centralized approach than having police out with their own page or Eric Public Works out with their own page. I just don't like that, but this is my thoughts.
I'm not really sure what a Facebook page would do any different than what we have with our page and our email blast and that, except open us up to, I don't know, I'm not sure what difference it would make. Or I don't know what the purpose of a Facebook page would be, except opening up that line of communication back and forth. But we have our emails posted on the website and that, so.
I would say that from the perspective, because I'm certainly one of the people that was kind of a driving force with us really opening this up and talking about it, because I'm looking more long-term, you know, where people are and where people gather information from. And as being someone that just recently went through an election, I personally experienced that I thought that social media is a place where a lot of people do gather information from. And I just don't want us to be behind the 8 ball if it's something where it could be very minimal and utilized. And again, I think that Julie pointed out a great point, and that is to talk to some other local municipalities that have been incorporating and using it for a couple of years and seeing where it is. I think right now as a board, I'll be perfectly honest, I think the fear is that we have some contentious issues going on in our community. So you start going, oh, is this really the time to open up something like that? But I just look at it, and it's not meant disrespectfully. I had, I think, a great conversation with Jim about the fact that they have, that him and Kim have a site. It was not meant as anything negative. It was more a matter of a lot of people go to that. Sometimes I could be in it and I'd say, boy, I might, and I'm not a very big Facebooker because from a work standpoint, I'm very limited with what I can and cannot do. But if I have gone to it, I've said, hey, boy, I think that something's inaccurate on there. I'm not in a position that I can post and say something like, boy, I think you guys have inaccurate information, because now I could be subject to Open Meetings Act violation, and I'm not going to do that. But I do believe, and I said this to Jim, I believe that the perception out there is that the Cary Connection website is viewed as a village site. I do believe that there's a misconception there.
It does have that disclaimer on it.
It's pretty minimal, but I just.
I don't agree with you at all. It doesn't have anything there that points people to it being a village website.
It has the Village of Cary, the Village of Cary logo. I mean, a picture right there that says Village of Cary.
That's crazy. People use that as a symbol of our town, not as a symbol of village government.
You know, I'm just going to speak to you from a standpoint that I'm on the Chamber of Commerce, and I've had numerous business people ask me about it. I'm not making this to be antagonistic. I'm not saying you shouldn't have one. I'm not saying anything. That I'm saying, number one, it brings to the forefront to me that number one, I think is an important issue. When I look at this and read some of this, I'm thinking, is it possible that some of the communication on there is going to be subject to Retention Act? I don't know. That's a great question for Julie.
It isn't, I don't think so, but I would also say if there's an issue on there, I've been addressed by the mayor on some things that I have corrected on there. You are allowed to make statements as to, your friends on Facebook, if you see something wrong on there, or call me and we can change it. But it can't be policed 100% of the time, but there are methods to handle that. And also, you're allowed to start your own Facebook page.
Yeah, absolutely. I'm not trying to dissuade you from what you're doing. What I'm saying to you, part of it is a compliment to the fact that I told you this, that I found out from my experiences how much information people do get from those type of sites. So I'm looking at it saying, boy, if we're looking not short-term, but long-term longevity for the village, if this is where the future is going on social media, then perhaps that's something that we should be incorporating into our own policy. I mean, there are two separate issues here with regards to, some of my concerns that I've spoken to you very openly about. But the other issue is really focusing on what should we be doing as a village. And I think we want to be as transparent as possible. we want to provide information. We do a great job, we do have weekly newsletters, there's no question that we are getting out there trying to do that. But is there something more, I don't know what the monitoring is, you know, the concern, just like Kim mentioned, we're very, very spread thin. You don't have people that are sitting there looking for things to do in the village and your employees, everyone's very busy. So I'm not trying to make more work for them, but I don't know if it's something that's up and going and it just becomes a normal course of action that will provide a little more transparency for our residents.
I would like to make 2 comments to touch on Trustee Covelli and Trustee McAlpine's points vis-a-vis the public site. I'm not going to comment on other sites. I got to give you an example. The chief and I had an incident about 3 weeks ago. It was about Thursday night, about 10 o'clock. And we had, and I'm not going to get into detail about it, but we had an incident in town, public safety related, and messaging went out immediately after it by various parties within less than a half hour before it was even looked into by our police department. And it created an informational issue for a lot of folks, and it ended up not really being what it first looked like, you know, when it first started. And some of the reasoning that it became such a spiral issue out was because of how fast it got upon social media. And that's everyone's right to do that. But the next day, there's a lot of scared parents about school when they didn't need to be. And from my perspective, I bring that up in a different way in that, you know, there's some thoughts about, well, we should have a Facebook page, so we should get, you know, we can get that message out there, you know, immediately and respond to that. I have trouble with that in a public safety situation, I really do. I have trouble because, you know, we're in the middle of, in that case, trying to figure out what's going on in real time, knowing that there's exposure from a community informational standpoint, but, you know, message can change and then message can change again, you know, overnight. And this desire to get this immediate message out in the middle of it is concerning to me. And so I'm not a proponent of the Facebook heavy approach. I mean, I would be open-minded to think about a Facebook light approach, which I detailed at the beginning, from the standpoint of public information that can get out. But I'm not a proponent of the immediacy aspect, especially as it relates to public safety. I'll give you another quick example. I mean, Julie mentioned, you know, boil order or something like that. I've had experience from some of my colleagues at Grays Lake. Years ago, literally, I would run around to doors with notices to hand those out if they ever had a boil order. And now, because they have Twitter and what do you call it, Facebook, you know, they were able in a boil order situation to get a message out to thousands of people like that. And so I see the value in some situations, but you know, I'm telling you, in public safety, I'm going to be very opinionated about that because I think there's just this desire to over-inform.
Well, I think it's, you know, when it comes to public safety, I think that's a whole separate issue. But for instance, just coming off a big weekend we just had in town with the Main Street, but I had several people ask me why we were, they would have thought we would have got a tweet. I'm like, I didn't even know what Twitter is. I understand what Twitter is, but you know, I'm not participating in it. But people rely on that avenue for their communication. They go to Facebook because they get these alerts all the time. And I had a couple of residents say, you know, you should be posting these pictures on Facebook, get more people to come down. I get that. So you know, for information like that, it's good, or information about pending projects that we may have, or like when we have the recycle days or something like that. You know, more informal or like an informational type of a drive. You know, I'm not looking to create controversy. I'm looking to promote things because I know that there's people that look at things to see what's going on in the village, and that's a good place, I think, for them to gain the knowledge. I ask people, when they ask about the Facebook, I said, look, you get our Cary News Weekly. And a majority of them say no. And I said, well, you need to go to the website and click on the Cary News Weekly and sign up for it. You're going to get e-blasts, you know, at least once a week, if not twice, about things that are going on, you know, pertinent to the events that are going on right now. And I think that's it. But I think the way that people are moving towards to get their information, they're not going to websites anymore. I don't think that people are going to websites anymore. They want instant information, and they're wanting something that they feel is credible. And I think that if we control the message, it becomes more credible.
It's a 24/7 message if not managed properly.
Right, and
Because it's very difficult to draw boxes around it, and it's very difficult to draw boxes around 7 different viewpoints of it. I mean, we would certainly have to have some understanding of what the expectations would be in order to properly implement it.
Is there a desire among the trustees to have a Facebook page? I didn't realize we were moving down that path to really have a Facebook page. I thought this was just more social policy.
That's the next
And
part.
I thought it was more just the social policy of what's already out there. That's what I thought we were gonna kind of be focusing on.
I brought this up
Do you
because
wanna, Mark, are you the one pushing for the Facebook page? You want a
I
Facebook
did.
page?
I would say I do.
I
would like us to
I
have.
haven't pushed for anything. I didn't think that we were gonna discuss this. I thought it was a good idea to get an idea of what social media, what our responsibilities are as elected officials and government officials, pertaining to all the things that we have to deal with.
I mean, a Facebook page isn't gonna get out to 7,000 residents of Cary, households of Cary. It's gonna get to those 700 people that like the page, out of the 50,000 people
Right.
at Glenview. So
Well,
it
we're
just
all-
depends on how
I
many
agree.
likes you get.
Well, it's interesting that but, for instance, we made the decision when we were, we've been working on videotaping our meetings for the last year or so. We rewired our boardroom to do this, and we made the decision not to go to the extent that we were planning on going to it because we wanted to see what the drive is for it. And if you look on our YouTube page and you look at the number of people that view that, it's actually kind of deflating. I mean, there's not as many people that are as engaged in this as I originally thought would be. So, I think that we kind of made the right decision on that to kind of hold back on the big production and, all the big cameras that we were gonna buy and all that stuff, because that's not a source that they're going to. I don't know why some have 15 views. I think the most views that we had on there was the Public Works event. I think they had like 225 views. I'm like, wow, that would have been never the one that I thought that would have had. So it's like, people want information in a different way. So I'm just looking at, we've been ridiculed that, you're not getting your message out. You need to get, your message out better. Well, this is another avenue that we can help get our message out.
Ridicule?
Well, that's why I
Ridiculed,
had a question.
ridiculed about, doing the contentious thing that we have going on. Well, we didn't know about this, we didn't have any idea. But, people are saying, well, we didn't know. And I'm like, well, do you get the Cary News Weekly? No, I don't. Do you go to our website? No, I don't. Do you attend village board meetings? No, I don't. Well, those are the avenues that we have to get information out to the public in the most, the quickest way possible, the most transparent way possible. That's what we work with right now. But we're finding out that people aren't going to our website, which has a lot of information. We spent a lot of money a couple of years ago building that website to put all this information on. And now we're finding out people aren't as interested in our website as.
I gotta just lay out the issues. I mean, when I started here 4 years ago, we had some things we had to work through, and one of the things I had was there was 3 of my board members at the time were upset because allegedly in 11, during an election, the village allegedly, I don't know if it was true or false, but 3 people viewed it, that a newsletter went out that had articles in it that were steered towards various candidates. And it was a huge issue. And we have a Cary Weekly, we're very careful with how we put it out, etc. My concern is just the political reality of that time of every 2 years and being viewed as though, whatever message goes out, it's tainted. And I just think we would be cognizant of that, and there's ways around it. Many communities deal with it, but I'll tell you, sometimes election seasons here are controversial, and I'm not excited about having to referee a lot of that. I want to get the public information out, but I just would, if we go down that path, I want to have 7 people, telling me this is how we're going to do it, this is the rules, and it's level. There's not pressure from various places to do X or Y. It's got to be just like this, and I've got to be able to administer it without pressure.
Well, and I think that all comes down to what Julie pointed out, is that you have to have, what rules have to be abided by. And if someone's doing something or getting into a political aspect rather, we can say, we're going to delete that because you didn't abide by rule number 5 or whatever it is. I just, we're talking about millennials and how, the demographics as things are changing, where they're getting their information from. That is where they're getting their information from. I can tell you that's where my 30-year-olds are getting their stuff from, and even my 17-year-old and stuff like that, they're just tied into that. It's common. First thing they do is get up in the morning, they check Facebook, and then at lunch they check Facebook, and then, a couple times, I'm not talking, me, if I get on it, it's an hour and a half, because I only get on it once a month. So I gotta, plan out a big amount of times, I gotta go through all kinds of stuff. And I get in trouble because I hit like, and my son's like, what are you hitting like from? Someone posted 3 weeks ago. I'm like, first time I've been on in 3 weeks, what are we say? So, but again, I'm just trying to look at where we're at, but I firmly agree that it's gotta be informational. We're not looking to be a controversial site. I think that there's a demand for it. I don't know how big the demand is. I'm not looking for it to be something where, my intentions is just informational, to be like, here's what we can post that's going on. It's another avenue. If we're doing the Cary News Weekly, you're gonna have PDFs of most of the things that you're posting on there. It's a matter of clicking that and adding that on. I don't, I'm not saying it's reinventing the whole wheel, because you've already done it for the weekly news feed that you're putting out. It's just another avenue that people might be more likely to tap into versus, whether they're getting the newsletter or whether they're going to a website. And I think with us improving our website, that's going to be maybe something that drives a little bit more there, but people still may not be going to that avenue to get information.
Well, it's like the decision we made before about the newsletter that we send out like every other month with the water bill, because seniors were saying they weren't getting any information. And seniors, with their water bill, they read the news. That's how they get their information.
Sure.
And we received a ton of compliments and thanks for putting this out there, because there's a lot of information in there, and that's what the seniors, that's how they get their information. So I think we kind of nailed it with that 2 years ago or 3, whatever it was.
Yeah, it's helped a lot,
It's-
and we don't have newsletter issues.
Yeah,
We had to think about the next generation of this.
I think though, if it is static, I think we're not gonna have a high demand for it. That's when I've experienced the same thing you've experienced, where you're just posting stuff, you're not gonna have a lot of people, and then Julie talked about those algorithms.
Yeah.
So what's gonna happen then? They're thinking, I'm gonna show up in their news feeds.
Oh.
So then they forget about it. So it almost has to be dynamic and interactive for people to engage in it. I've seen other villages who do more of that approach, and they have more people liking their pages, commenting
Yeah.
on their pages. The village I work for also subscribes to the static one, which is like maybe 200 likes.
Mm-hmm.
So just something to think about. If you're gonna be spending all this time on it, it may go wasted if it gets buried within that algorithm.
When you say static, do you mean that that's how it's set up? That there's a choice that you have it be like one way? Is it? I just don't
No,
know.
it's static in that, they'll post an event.
Okay.
They'll post.
I got it.
Like very just a couple posts, and there's never comments, there's
Got it.
never, we use it all the time to advertise stuff, and I find, when you ask people where they heard about it from, it's not, hey, where it from.
Got it.
So, it's usually from something else.
Jim and Kim, would you guys consider putting something on here, encouraging people to sign up for the News Weekly? Sure. I had a great opportunity, everyone, to participate at the IML conference in Chicago last week, as well as the McHenry County Council of Governments last night. And I went there purposely. I attended the social media policy, how to set up accounts, what the trends are. And I also took a survey. I was in a round table with other trustees, councilmen for village boards and city boards. And again, it's limited, but out of the 22 trustees that I surveyed at IML and McCog, 21 of those villages had websites. 6 of those have been updated within 2 years, and I know we're going through that right now. 6 of those villages had Facebook and or Twitter accounts, which are monitored, which means they have a person during the 8 hours of the business day that monitored it and replied back to Facebook so that it was active, dynamic, or they tweeted. And that's how they got out their information during the day. They also did the emergency alerts. They have the Amber alerts, through their system. But those were monitored. That was 6 out of 22. So, it wasn't a lot, But then I had 9 trustees or council members who personally had Facebook pages. And they were all single trustees running them, and they were using them to, again, to help to promote the village things. So they would comment on their Facebook pages about something that was coming up. There was 2 trustees in Huntley last night, and they said they had started a Facebook page, and so that they could, talk back and forth. And they said they broke up the 2 so that they wouldn't do OMA violation. And so that if you said, hey, the police department is having a bike safety thing, and then Rick could chime in and say, hey, not only that, they're also going to, teach people how to put in car seats. So that's why they had them separate, but they promote village events, and you're absolutely right. It is where we're going. The Facebook, social media, at IML, the seminar was packed. It was really packed because every village, city, and town is out there realizing that they need to drive people to the information. I ran on transparency. I think every one of us did. The filming, was something that's been in the works. We know that people want the information. There's nothing worse than hearing a resident say, hey, I didn't know. So one of the things last night, the Huntley trustees said, well, what we do is at every event we have a sign-up sheet, and we go around and we don't just leave it on the table. We actually go around and say, here, can we have your email? And they aggressively pursue so that they let them know about the traffic, obviously, with Huntley's stuff. There's a north side of Huntley, south side of Huntley divide with Del Webb versus the other side of town. So they're, it's very dynamic, event there. Well, that was it. So I think what my little survey showed is that everybody's aware of it. They're still not, again, being able, without somebody monitoring it, it's pretty useless. Some of the village said, well, we're gonna hire somebody, in the interest of.
I've got 2 police
public
officer positions I had to cut from the budget to deal with the state issue that we don't have.
No, I'm just
And
talking about
they-
how the other ones are doing it, and they're saying that, that.
Yeah.
And maybe they do have more money, I don't know. But I thought it was interesting.
It was very interesting.
So,
I don't have a problem with the village having a Facebook site. I mean, that's fine, but I think in our current climate, it seems like we're jumping the gun a little bit. We debated, this board wasn't in agreement that we should spend $10,000 for better software for videotaping the meetings, so we're on YouTube, which I don't think is a very user-friendly format, and some of those numbers on YouTube are from people only watching a minute or 2 where it doesn't get counted. So those numbers might not be realistic in the scheme of things. There might be more partial views than they dictate. But my concerns are like Trustee Cavelli's, that if we're going to have a Facebook page, it has to be engaging. And if you're expecting people to like it and sign up for it, I mean, yeah, there will be some people that sign up for bulletins and notices, but I don't see them, unless it's constantly updated and maintained, I don't see a big draw to it. And that's where I'm thinking, well, we didn't want to spend $10,000 for a better, more user-friendly system for the videotaping, but now we're thinking about spending a lot more money to have somebody maintain a Facebook site. I don't know if I agree with that, so.
One update that's not totally related, but we will be available October 6th to go live on YouTube for the first time. We've got the equipment set up, so residents will actually be able to be at home and watch live streaming. So we'll watch how the hit rate on that. we're continuing to adapt with the guidance you gave us in terms of technology.
Well, I don't think anybody, well, I'm not proposing hiring somebody to do this, we have other needs that we have right now, but we're looking at different opportunities that, how we can get the message out to people that say they want to see different, medias, that we're gonna be able to get them what they need to have. In time, when things pick up or we make some other decisions, that might be part of it, but we just don't have the staff time to do it, which is frustrating in itself.
Well, what about checking with some other local municipalities that have been utilizing it and see what kind of time, what's the time element that they're requiring to maintain it, and as, God bless you, and just out of curiosity, and I don't know if you even know an answer to this, but how often do you guys, and I don't really answer this, how often do you post on your page? Is it a daily thing? Is it as things come up? Is it, I just don't know the answer. I'm not meaning that, I don't mean to be facetious, I just don't know.
These
No, I'm
times that
talking-
we're doing it was a lot of time.
Okay.
That's why I was,
Okay, so I'm asking Jim and Kim, as someone that's monitoring one, and you're saying you're to keep people engaged, and I understand that. How often are you having to post to keep people engaged?
We have a group, it's pretty much nonstop, and we don't post nonstop, but the group contributes on a regular basis.
No, I understand, but I'm saying, from the standpoint, yes, contributing is totally different than actually taking the time to post. So how often do you have to post something to keep people engaged?
I think that's arbitrary, it depends on the topic, and I'm not an authority on that.
Sure.
I think it would depend on what you're discussing and how, what the feelings are.
Sure.
So-
And again, perhaps, because I'm not, and that's a totally different, I think, forum that what my thought was for the village. My thought was more informational, but I was just curious, because I don't know. But I would think that a great avenue to look at is some of our local communities that do have an active Facebook
Well, what
page.
I would say off the cuff from the research I have done is I'm suggesting that I would be open to looking at the static approach, which might not get the kind of hit rate that we would ultimately desire. I get concerned when we get into these comments. I get concerned because I have to be concerned about residents that come to the front counter, residents that call on the phone, residents that put service requests through the normal mechanism. And then the concern is somehow through the social media platform, they can't necessarily be allowed to lap
Right.
everybody that comes in. We have hundreds of these requests that we just handle instinctively.
Sure.
And, so that I have to make sure there's equity.
Right,
You know,
also
so-
have to circumvent what a normal procedure would be.
And there has been requests that come in on our page that
Yeah.
I'll forward over to Chris or
Sure.
Eric or the chief or, so I do believe that probably would happen. Who would run the page here? Would it be you or would it be Jake?
Well, it wouldn't be dispatched below this level because
I
of,
figured.
especially considering just the concern I have about centralization. Yeah. It's
Well, I don't remember who you were talking about, because I was talking, I think we were talking to the same people at the same time, but they were talking about, it depends on what's going on in the
Oh,
community
yeah.
at the time.
Right.
They go, it'll be weeks
Right.
or a month or something, and there's really nothing going on, but if there's something hot going on, that's when bam, 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 bam. And that's when they devote a lot of their staff time combating it. They see it's kind of cyclical, depending on what's happening in the community at the time, whether it's good or bad. They said it could be something good that's going on, or it could be something that people don't like. So, and they said, they were saying that it could be weeks or a month before anything is changed on that. So,
On what now?
on Facebook, by putting out the information that would engage more people in their comments or whatever it is, and, that's when people would start chiming in.
well, I've got a Facebook, got a
Oh.
Starbucks. Oh, well then, boom, the whole thing shut up. Oh, we need one on the north side of town. Okay.
Even with the recent, Pegcor request with the variance.
What's Pegcor?
Look how many emails we got. I
Yeah.
spent a lot of time even just responding, just a couple sentences, like thank you for your time. I mean, look at it, that took a lot of my time. I'm assuming you guys staff-wise too, it took a lot of your time to answer, reply to emails, trying to answer questions and whatever else. So I do agree with what you're saying. It depends if there's a certain issue that people really hone in on. And again, we're looking at some of these other things. We talked about the consulting company with the upcoming
Zoning ordinance?
thank you. And that was one of the things we talked about is you guys don't have the staff to even do part of that. And understand that. But now we're saying, well, you know, how is that gonna translate this direction, I guess, is my question. Not opposed to the site, just so you know, I'm just, these are all the things I'm thinking of right now.
Rick, you've been awfully silent during this time. You have any feedback, thoughts?
Yeah, I don't know what a poke is. I don't know what
He's got an abacus at home, I know.
I tell my daughter, I ask my daughter all the time, what do I do with these notifications and pokes, because I don't know what they are. So, that gives you an idea of where I am on Facebook. I do remember though, a number of years back, probably 8 to 10, there were a couple of folks that were out talking about how to use LinkedIn, both professionally and personally. And I went to a lot of those educational seminars to understand, because I was very new at that point in time. I'm assuming there are probably people that could come and educate us on how to use Facebook, because I don't really know how to use it. I have a page, my wife and I have one, don't do anything with it, we have one. And I, you know, whenever you listen to TV or read a magazine or whatever, you see on the bottom, like it's on Facebook and you've got it on whatever, you know. So there must be some benefits. And I agree with pretty much everybody that has said, you know, it's the way people are communicating. I was astounded when, I think it was last week when we had the storms, you know, even my BlackBerry at work was buzzing at home and there was a warning. You know? I know I'm going to get it on my regular phone, but I didn't think I was going to get it on the work phone, but I did.
That's a quote.
I don't know what it was. It was an annoyance to me. So I guess my point
Being
is,
videotaped here.
my point is this, there, at some point in time, there's gonna come a need for it. I don't know when that time is. It might be 6 months, it might be 6 years. There's gonna come a time when we're gonna need it. So I viewed this tonight as kind of taking me from, you know, below ground zero to at least a couple of steps above to give me some things to think about. I've been thinking about a lot of things, which is why I'm not asking any questions. But I think it's just the first step in multiple meetings that we're going to have over time to educate ourselves. So at some point, we're going to have to change something. I just don't know what it is.
Okay, good discussion. Anybody else have anything else to add to it?
Any action steps?
I think, talk to other municipalities, see what their time situation is, maybe comparable sized municipalities.
Right, they've been doing it a couple
A
years.
couple of years that have something just to figure out what their time commitment, if there's actual staff time or.
So you're talking about Facebook, though, right? But this wasn't a discussion about Facebook. This was a discussion about social media.
Well, that's what's just one of the main reasons I was concerned about this was emails and YouTube. The mere fact that we're using YouTube now, we're videotaping these things. How does that separate us from things? And Julie made that very clear that these are all things that now we have to maintain and we own this, and this is something that it's foilable, and you know we just need to make sure that we have it, and just to see how that we could get to that next level. That's how I interpreted this.
But we gotta say it though, just so we're clear, that there have been questions or whatever the right word is with respect to Cary Connection. And so I wanted to just have an evening where whatever it is on the table, let's solve it and move on to the next thing. And I don't feel like we've done that. You know, so I appreciate the feedback on the public side of it. That was part of this that helps me bring back to you what you need. But if there's anything else, let's lay it out on the Cary Connection, because we need to move on to other things. I mean, just as a group. Because I think
Chris,
that
I
was.
had no problem doing that, but you said specifically this meeting was nothing to do with Cary Connection. Now I feel like you just turned
No,
the corner.
I'm listening to tonight's discussion and I'm hearing some things that tie to Cary Connection. The comment about how it's viewed with respect to the emblem, the comment about how the disclaimer is on there. I think we just I just want to walk out of the meeting and know we're good, because we got to move on to other things. That's what I'm saying.
I'm good with that.
Okay.
Because I, you know what, I actually really appreciate this, because it actually reassured me even more that we're all good.
Okay.
I mean, we have the disclaimers, you know, we aren't in any way, shape or form trying to say that we are an official village site. You you know, I know, like Jim said, if there's ever been anything that's been brought to the attention, any corrections have been made, and Dave, you asked for something put on there, absolutely, we try to promote,
Yeah,
so we
that'd be
did
good.
promote the Cary Fest,
Mhm.
so, I mean, I appreciate the presentation.
What about a situation, and Jim and I talked about this, so again, I'm not, you know, I mean, I felt that this is very informative and information that we need, because as Rick had said, who knows if it's 6 months, who knows if it's 6 years, but at some point, we're trending, it seems that we're trending towards things, whether it would be a Facebook, or at the point we get to it, it would be Twitter at that point, I don't know what it will be. But you know, the concern is sometimes and Julie may be able to answer this, and maybe she can't, but I can give a specific incident that I had 2 different businesses come up to me that were very concerned about comments that were made, disparaging comments on the Cary Connections about a resident that was in support of the Gardner Barnes, the Pet Court type of thing. And I can't give you all the specifics, but something about people got on it then and started going in and posting articles about that she had a altercation with the law and really demeaned her and made some absolutely disparaging remarks about her.
You're talking about the comments that you made, not what was posted.
Exactly,
Okay,
I'm just going on, but then somebody posted on a link to an article that had information about her, and then when it all came down, the woman got very silent and was very belittled, and hours later, she finally responded and said, well, here's the real situation that occurred in my life, and it was my house with my ex-husband, and he lost the house, and blah, 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 and I tried to get in there and get my kid's stuff, and all the charges were dropped. But all of this disparaging comments were made against her on that. And again, when I say this to you, this is not meant as anything mean. I know that you were not the ones posting it. However, I still feel that people viewed this as it was a Cary website. I just do. I know you say you have your disclaimers. I'm not doubting you.
Ellen, I know what you're talking about, and what was posted was somebody posted a link to an article. And that's all, just somebody who can simply Google search on the internet.
Sure.
I mean, that's not private information, that's Googling. You can Google my name and something will pop up, and your name will
Sure.
pop up. So I mean,
How did that benefit the village of Cary?
again, it's not an official Village of Cary website.
Okay, so the answer is that we have to be more relevant than anything that is negative. We have to get the information and the message out there. We have to be the answer to the residents' questions. The village has to be the answer to that.
Well, that's part why we have this 2-part discussion tonight, because I would like to debate that. Because that's where I feel like we're being reactive to something, and I don't know why. Because I feel like then there's like this viewpoint, well then the village has to do X because Y is happening, and I don't know that I agree.
Okay. So let me just say that regardless of
Right.
Cary Connection, I've been saying since day one, we need to do everything that we can in order to get more people to sign up for that, to get the word out there. So part of that action plan should be that when we're at the Town Fest or when we're at the Public Works, that we actively are going out and pumping and asking people to sign up. And would you like to find out about events that are going on? Would you like to get weekly things? And then be that source of information for the residents of Cary, to have that there. That's.
And Dave, you could certainly have a meeting.
I was just gonna say the same
You know,
thing.
absolutely.
Well, that's why those
And-
9 trustees
Right,
have
and,
our page.
at Cary Fest, you guys were gracious enough, or the chamber was gracious enough to provide us a booth there. I mean, that could have absolutely been done, so I think there's plenty of opportunity for that.
I have a question about some social media policies. Do you guys have access to some that we could review and read?
They change a lot and they're very custom. I guess it depends on what you're looking for. I mean, I have a ton of samples, but every community is different. Some just want a terms of use, like the comment policy, and that's all they have. Others have a much broader, and they treat police different because there's different issues with police. Some are employee-only policies. Some policies are with internet and tech use. So, I mean, I've drafted 150 policies, and not one of them looks like the other one. I mean, there will be pieces that are the same. The comment policies, what I posted is pretty similar.
We've got a basket.
She
like
could
a-
provide us a couple that might be
Like
relevant
100
after she's
too.
done the dialogue tonight.
I guess I'm looking for some standard stuff that's pretty much in all of them, just to help me kind of
I've
understand.
got 3, Rick, that I'll send it to everybody, through Mark and Chris. They're from Huntley, Algonquin,
Yeah.
Geneva.
So what you can do is pull from, and this is what I help clients, is pulling, it's almost a question and answer. What are the issues that you're looking for? What do you need to address? Some communities deal with, have a one person speaks for the village only. Some communities just, it's anyone. I mean, and employee use, I talked about zero tolerance or minimal use. I mean, it runs the gamut. So it's almost a question, okay, how do you want to deal with this issue? Who's going to be the administrator? How are you going to moderate? What platforms are you going to be on? How are you going to regulate your employees? Are you going to regulate officials? Some communities regulate public officials, some do not. So a lot of different pieces, but yeah, I've got many samples, and then probably would be pulling from a variety.
So can I just touch on the regulating public officials for a second? And this really goes to your question about not feeling comfortable walking away from here, you know, as it relates to Carey Connections.
Well, I brought it up tonight because I think it's the elephant part of the room, and I want to just end it because
I don't think we're gonna
we
end
got
it
to move
tonight,
on. We got to move on to something else.
I guess I'm curious, from your perspective and from your experience, have you worked with a lot of municipalities that individual trustees or department heads or people, you know, involved in the community have had private websites?
Private, yes, a lot of the communities do. Private that is professional, not as many. So private sites are one thing. I have my own private site, but I don't talk about work. It's not professional in any way. You know, I'm not talking about my employer or that sort of thing. I keep those. That's real common, and rarely does that bleed into the work. So we usually don't regulate that. It's if, you know, like the Indiana governor had an Indiana governor page, and that was his, it was personal, it wasn't run by the government, but it was seen as kind of a government page because his picture and it was him and that. So how do communities, I mean, communities deal with it in all sorts of ways. Some, it's anything goes. It's just, you know, they don't touch that. Others, there are samples, and you probably heard them at the IML, where if it's a position of the village, if it's a viewpoint or a message that's coming from the village, then it is shepherded through one person or one office, so the spokesperson. And I wouldn't tell you how to do that because that's a policy issue, and that's something you probably need to hammer out.
And I believe that, you know, really what we're talking about here, the second part is done. I mean, the existing page that we've discussed isn't changing, it's just a fact. We need to decide how does that affect or not affect our village decision, and what are we making it for? And what do we want to do to, in a phased way or not do it at all? Why are we collecting the information? I hear 2 people that are calling out for it, I don't hear 4. And I'm not opposed to doing work for the sake of it, but if I don't have 4 people, I don't understand why I'm doing it. Because we can chase, we have a lot of those chases that we do on things, and if there's not 4, I think we're wasting time.
At this point, I'm not in favor of it. I feel that, I think you're trying to create a counterbalance to what is out there currently. And I think, you know, some of the things that have been posted and I've seen, you know, you're saying, well, they're telling lies, you know, they're lying about stuff.
Mhm.
And then you know, I don't know, I just feel that you're trying to then, you know, if you don't like that, create your own webpage. I don't think, what is the village going to do? You know, what will the village then be posting? You know, if there's something posted out there that you don't like, what is the village going to come back and then post and say, well, wait a minute, you know, that's all.
That's not how I do it.
That's not how I do it at all.
I mean, because I just feel that we already have our website, the information is there, and then you were saying, well, we can cut and paste and take that information and put it on the Facebook page, and then what?
No.
You know, so it's like
I
the same
was-
thing, except the Facebook page then allows for the comments and the interaction to go on. Who's gonna be making the comments and the interaction? You know, Chris posts something, what the hell are you posting that for? You know, I don't agree with that. You know, that's on our village website. So,
I understand, let me at least make it clear. It is not in counterbalance to that at all. I thought that since, if you remember, before I was ever sworn in, I said that I thought we needed a social media policy based upon some things that I dealt with coming into office, based on a trustee that posted disparaging, even threats, loud threats on a website about me that were untrue before I even got sworn in. So I've been on the social media saying I think we need a policy since day one. It was before there was ever even Carrot Connections. So the two things are not, I was just saying, hey, they have one. I'm saying that from my perspective going through this, it made me realize when I came in for an election that a lot of people get their information from that. And I'm thinking that if my job is to provide as much information and transparency to residents, and that's one of the things that I ran on, that I felt that anything we can do, videotaping was one of the things I said in the article on the Northwest Herald that I thought we needed to do, making sure that we have social media presence. Those are things that I've always wanted. It has nothing, and you're thinking that I'm trying to counterbalance. I'm not. I'm not looking to sit there and say, oh gosh, because I really don't, and it's not disrespectful, I'm just not good about using it. I know I need to improve upon getting that. I'm looking at it as an avenue that we have so many positive things going on in our village. Then why in the world wouldn't we want to take another avenue to disseminate that information to our residents? If it's something like, hey, Main Street Fest, and we have a post on, and then we had, something up there that said, hey, pictures may be taken, during this, and we could post some interactive things in there. Wow, I think that'd be a great boost for our village to show wonderful things that we're doing for our residents. With it being our second year, there's still a lot of people that didn't know about it yet. It takes a couple of years for these things to really take root. So, honestly, it is not in counteraction to anything. I'm not looking to stop anybody from anything they're doing. Anybody could do a private webpage, you're absolutely right. I'm looking at it saying that I feel that there is, that is a methodology that a lot of people use to get their information. And if we have an opportunity and it wouldn't take a whole lot of extra time, then perhaps we do it. If it takes a whole lot of time, then, again, I don't know if now's the time or if it's 6 months, like we consider if it's 6 years, I don't know. But I just see that that's where the trends are going, that people are going to get more and more information. We made sure to make sure that people that are in an older demographic, we found a way to get them information from what I'm hearing that's been very successful. So why wouldn't we want to say we want these millennials, and we want to say we want to give you the same information, the methodology that you need to get your information that we did for an aging population. We want to do that for the younger population as they're coming in. So I'm just trying to be visionary and say, let's look at long-term, not short-term, and how do we get there? And to me, this is a great way to start it, to have a basic to say, we need some of this foundation before we could decide to do anything.
don't we already have a lot of this already in place in terms of what our employees can do and can't do?
Yeah, in the
on
handbook,
computers?
when we did the handbook, I got it covered from the employee use standpoint. I may have Julie look at it quick just to make sure, because things change in a year.
Sure.
But I think we're all right on that.
But to your point, Jeff, I don't go on Carrot Connection, I don't read it, I hear about a lot of stuff, I have people cut and pasting and sending me things about it. I deal with a lot of the disparaging remarks. I don't judge what should go on if we were to have a social media policy or a Facebook page. I view it as, it's not gonna be what I want or what you want or what Jim wants or what Ellen wants or what Rick, it's what's going on in the village of Cary. Approved projects, and we have this. Perfect example is if something were to come to Maplewood, say this is a project that might be coming with Maplewood, and state the facts. These are the facts from the village. Or that we're opening a new business, or that there's somebody else that's coming here. Those are the types of things that I think that would be very successful in this. I wouldn't do it to counteract what another Facebook page is doing.
Can't we already post that stuff though on our email blasts?
Absolutely, but what I'm saying is, a lot of people don't get that, and a lot of people like the Facebook thing. So I'm just saying, it's just another avenue to get the information out. It's not meant to counteract anybody's thing, it's a one-shot place where people can get the right information from a credible source, and we all know that this is factual. That's my idea.
Would it be more work for the staff
Yes, we've
For this
discussed it.
agreement, okay.
No, it's an expensive, it's not, we're not saying it, we're
Oh, no,
doing this,
no,
we're
no,
just having
no,
a
I'm
discussion.
just, yeah, I'm just saying that out loud.
Do they both get approved?
You know.
Oh, good. That's good. We're in our Starbucks.
No.
That could be the
But
first
you know,
post on Facebook.
that's my whole point, is that there's so many good things that I just think that that would be a great avenue to be able to get that information out to people. Hey, this just passed, or this is what's going on. And, right, no, absolutely, whatever it is, I mean, I just think that it is another tool in our tool belt. And I think that, you know, I think that we want to use as many tools available to us that are cost effective and not gonna suck out, you know, time from the village that we're not able to, that we don't be able to do. I don't know, I just feel that, it's worth, exploring.
Well, during the 10-minute discussion I am at the roundtable for trustees, councilmen, that explained the situation that we had, contentious issues in the village, and there were multiple places for information, and how did you deal with it? Like I said, the guy in Huntley, you know, they have a north side, west, south side, you know, discussion.
House versus
A lot,
sides.
oh yes, a lot of towns do it, and basically they said, good luck, there's not, you know, there's not a simple answer out there. What you need to do is you need to get out there and make sure people know about your town. And so, I mean, it's a tough thing to swallow. Some of the villages tried doing the policy that said, you know, anybody posting, you know, on the village saying there won't be any, you know, disparaging, and they tried to come up with policies like that. And that's what drove the trustees to have their own page. They said, you know what, I can say what I want on my own page. So that kind of, you know.
Any other
Let
comments?
me ask you a question. Have you worked with many municipalities where every individual board member of the board perhaps had their own Facebook page?
Maybe not everybody, but most would have their own personal page. There was one community where the trustees had their own personal pages, and they also had, it was almost more of a campaign page, so trustee so-and-so's page, and that's what they used during election cycle. It kept it more election related as opposed to pictures of their dogs and kids and that sort of thing on their personal page. So I mean, it runs the gamut, but, and the more that the board members are involved in social media, the more likely that the village itself or the city will be, you know, on all platforms.
You see, I've been struggling to keep this in, so don't take it the wrong way. Because I really don't mean it about your page. And this has been bugging me ever since we started this day. So, I mean, I can appreciate your desire to have a page and communicate to, you know, your constituents and the town as a whole. But there's nothing to stop Dave and I from having Gary disconnections and Jeff and, you know, I mean, then you start to have potentially an unlimited amount of groups of people that come together and have multiple sites out in the town. And I think that could be a nightmare, personally. And I'm not suggesting because I said that you should not have one. I'm just saying what bothers me and why I want to learn about how other towns are doing it is because I can see the potential to have multiple things going on that, you know, maybe your site tells the absolute correct message and all the other ones are wrong, or some are somewhere in between. And we're sitting here going, what do we do? Because we collectively should know the right answer. But, you know, Dave and Rick have got something that's here. You know, Kim and Jim got something that's here. Ellen and Jeff have got something that's here. And then the Village of Cary's Facebook page, or Cary News Weekly, or whatever, you know, item 10 years out in the road that comes to the table that we communicate with, has got something that different. And then I'm really scratching my head if I'm the public going, what's right? Who's right? And that troubles me. It really troubles me. It's like, I know that in 2015, we can't have any of it. We can't have none of it. That'll never happen. Nobody's gonna say, these are outlawed and you can't have such a thing. Conversely, because you're not outlawing them, unless you put some sort of controls around it, you could have 20 of them going on, and then I think your message could really be difficult to decipher. That's all I'm real worried about that, and I just need assurance in some form or another that when we continue this conversation, how do we get there? And I'm not, again, I don't have an answer. I'm just putting it on the table that I think, some folks in this room are concerned about Cary Connections. I am not. I don't go to it. It doesn't, if there have been things bad said about me, I don't really care. Mark obviously does. And other, sites could get raised that might say something negative about Jim or, and any one of us, right? So where's the message? How do you know what I'm saying?
I do, and I think that there's from the legal perspective, you said it in the beginning, you can't ban it. So we're not banning people's right to put out their own personal message and their own personal opinion. On the other hand, a municipality could, through a policy, control how the village message is being presented and transmitted. Not what any individual trustee or resident or anyone else wants to say that's their personal opinion, but what is the message of the village? And that's something and that's the policy decision that I don't have an answer for you, because that's something that you guys have to decide. How do you transmit the village message? I mean, how do you do that? Is it by appointing one person to be the speaker? That's how most people do, and most communities say that there's one administrator for Facebook, and that administrator controls what goes out. That's the person, whether it's the manager or in some of my very small communities, the village clerk runs so that's the person that, and it's not opinions, because it's this village message. So it's not an opinion page, it is information. Here's what's going on. We have a meeting set up, and here are the. So it actually is less difficult to if you take the approach that it is an information and dissemination, to say it's the management team. I mean, those are the people that control, because they know what the message is. They write the newsletter. They go to the meetings. They understand what a majority of the board has done in a meeting. This particular item was approved, here it is. This meeting is coming up, here's the agenda, here's an event that's easier, and then you choose one person.
I always assumed that was Chris.
I didn't want to say his name. Shoot,
I'll say it, sorry.
Hey, I surrendered if you, yeah, we could do it. I'll come back to you with more information, at a limited level. It's just where we get from static to really liking it that, I get concerned, and then the public safety aspect, because it's the 24/7 aspect of it. And you miss once and, you missed it, and that's just a big deal operationally, so.
Didn't you ask us to give you money for the police department so they could set up a 24/7 notification system?
Yeah, it was voted down.
Yes.
What I'm saying, if it was okay, then what's the?
Well, I don't think
understand
that, I don't think that I don't think the intent of using this type of, an outlet is for, emergency type things, like, it could be for a critical thing that's imminent, but, I think it's more for informational, credible information that's happening in the village right now.
I gave you the example tonight that I was worried about.
Right, and
Yeah.
but I just don't think that, I would say that would not be what we want to use something like that for, because I think that it would really be
That's why we need Twitter.
Yep, if there was a boil order or something like that.
When do you want this back?
Well, I think that Dave is interested in more information. Jeff is not. Kim is somewhat interested, I would say.
Yeah, like I said,
I don't want to spend any money on staff, extra staff.
that's my only concern.
Mine
That's
too.
always
That's been my
That is
concern.
my only thing, otherwise, yeah, I think it's a good idea to do
Yep.
it, it's just, we have all these part of Struggle Club.
Join the club.
I
That's my big.
think we all want to be, to both, we want to be good stewards of of the residents' money. So I think that that's not I think that we probably, everyone here would agree with that. There's nobody that doesn't want to be fiscally responsible with it. But I think the only way we can determine that is to really go a little further and see what is it.
Are you
Right,
okay
what
with
is
that,
that
Jim?
cost?
Gather
Yeah, I
information?
know, in fact, I brought up the same thing Kim was saying maybe a month ago with Chris, the same thing about staff time. I have big concerns, especially when we're not spending money on other things. You know, and now out of the blue, we're thinking about spending a lot of money on staff time doing this. So, I'm not against it though, to have a Facebook page, that's great, but.
I think for
The staff-
I want to make it clear too, I'm not against it, it's just that I don't see the real purpose for it that would meet any new need that we're not already meeting. Okay, so don't try to say that I don't want this and that I don't think it's a good idea, okay?
All right, any other discussion by the village board? Any requests of future items? I'll entertain a motion.
Oh, I do have something. I want the gravel pit on the next agenda because I do want to talk about that before you have people taking tours and things, so you're lining up your people to
I haven't lined up a soul. I haven't talked to anybody.
I want to have a discussion about the gravel pit and kind of talk about the Route 31 property and just, I want to have a discussion about the gravel pit with everybody
Sure.
and have it out there.
Is everybody in agreement with that? I'm sure.
Sure.
I don't know if mine needs to be an agenda item or if this could just be an update from Chris at a different time or email, but I was just looking for an update on the Main Street list. What was the outcome
Oh, I think that can be discussed tonight.
tonight?
Yeah, just a quick update. The outcome, just in general, I think was positive. We had, you know, and I have seen no numbers, and I'm not sure we ever will directly. But Saturday, from my observation, seeing it last year looked solid. Sunday was down, you know, a bit. But that's based on personal observation, not data. But overall, positive event. I mean, great feedback from the chamber. You know, it was there were some things that were different from first year to second year. I think we created some space by limiting some of the public safety. We had a large vehicle there last year. It was the command post that was out of the way, and we were able to add to the kids' activities. The kids' activities were unbelievable.
They were great.
And it just built upon what we did great, and you know, music, good feedback. I haven't talked with Brad since the weekend. But he was out.
Well, I think Saturday night, the numbers that they were talking about, I think we were about 600 and some odd people more than we were last year on a Saturday night. The numbers at the final event were down, but we had more people there in the middle of the day because we showed the Bears game, and it was steady the entire day. I mean, it was last year Sunday it was dead during the Bears game. There was some
It was
beer.
Bears versus Packers too, I think.
Yeah, but they were selling a lot more beer. A lot more people were buying food. It was steady from the moment we opened up to the end. It was steady. So I don't know exactly how the numbers are gonna, but they were up. They were guesstimating about 600 some odd people over Saturday. I mean, like,
From a police and public works perspective, because they do a lot of the field work for us, police was positive, no real issues. We had a couple minor things last year, none this year, which is great. They changed their strategy for enforcement, which was visible, and I think it made a difference as we learned by experience. And then public works, we spent a little more time on Saturday morning than we planned because of the weather, and there were some issues with the stage we helped out with from a distance because we don't want the liability, but there's an issue with the banner that was at the top. We helped. There's
I
only
think those
one.
were salary people. But
There's only one.
She's saying.
There's one follow-up issue that Brad's already taken, from what I see, taken care of. We had some grease leakage on the roadway. That's an issue from a cosmetic standpoint, and we're working on it. They've been upfront about it and done some additional scrubbing, but there's an issue there I'm working on.
Jim, just for your, actually for everybody's information, called Mark afterwards. And I made a comment that, you know, I was there Saturday for most all the way to the close. And I think the fest was absent the Hispanic community. And I think we have a pretty big Hispanic population in this town. And I suggested to Mark that next year, the chamber has to do something to involve the Hispanic community. They could have a band that would play, which frankly, given the bands that I heard, would probably be more enjoyable to listen to. Because the ones that I heard right around 6, 7 o'clock over by the Rotary tent, they weren't any good.
Oh, we had to go to the main stage.
I did go to the main stage too. I may not know
You were with the
Facebook,
kids,
I
who were-
know-
Elmo was there.
But you know what the party is.
No, I'm just saying, there was a tremendous amount of feedback out of the sound system that was by the Rotary tent around 6, 7 o'clock. It was terrible. In fact, it annoyed me while I was eating, it was that bad. But I just, you know, a separate issue altogether is this town has a pretty high percentage of Hispanics. 2 years in a row, we've done nothing to address the Hispanic community. That's just, I can't accept that.
Yeah.
So, you know, I want to go on record, because this was just a phone call to you, but I want to go on record if we need to do that next year.
I've already conveyed that to the chamber.
I think it's great.
Okay, I'll entertain a motion to adjourn.
So moved.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed?